6 a.m.
It happens, I'm sorry.
Welcome, everyone. Kim, do you want to do the roll call?
Oh, okay. That's that one sheet. Did you print them? I printed it, please.
While Kim is grabbing that, just want to welcome everyone that's in person here. Thank you guys for being here. We'll go around and introduce ourselves in a minute. And then want to thank everybody that made the time to be here online. I think, remind me, do you need to leave by 11 or something like that?
Bree and Rachel need to leave, or Rachel needs to leave early.
Rachel, what time do you need to leave? Is anyone online? Does anyone need to leave early if we need to vote on something?
I need to leave at 12. This is Rachel.
Good? Perfect. So
Christine.
Director Bragg, maybe just keep that in mind if we need to vote on something. But maybe we still have a quorum.
We do.
Okay. Kim, do you want to take roll?
Yes. And Red Eye. Randy Shipman.
Here.
Mike Shaker.
Here.
Bree Schulman.
Here.
Tina Evelyn. Here. Christy Hendricks. She's going to be on. George Gilbert.
Here.
Mary Jane Nisley. Landon Woods. Yeah, so for him. Lowell Giverson absent. Marissa.
Here.
Misty Lemire.
Present. Here.
Rachel Wanderscheid.
Present.
Sam Bobcho.
Here.
We are still expecting Christy, the judge, and Landon.
I'm here.
Okay, Christy's here.
That is Nina Hernandez, and she is the director of Friends of the Children Eastern Montana.
So as a public,
Yes.
honest public, okay. Nina, we'll give you a chance to introduce yourself here in a minute.
Sounds good.
Now looks like the only one online, on public, okay? So I do want to have a special welcome to Misty Lemire. Did I say it right?
Lemire.
Mr. Lemire is with us from Empowering Inner Strength Victims Assistance Manager from the Fort Belknap Tribal Health Department. And you'll get a chance to introduce yourself better in a minute, as well as to tell you kind of what's going on in your world. We'll let you go last so that you can kind of get a sense of how everyone else does that.
Okay.
So for today's meeting, the public will have opportunities to comment on individual topics. And then at the end of the meeting, the public may comment on any matter under the jurisdiction of the council that is not on our current agenda. The council cannot act, but will listen to any of those public comments and may ask staff to place the issue on a future agenda. And then a few things to keep the meeting on track. First of all, for action items, how many action items do we have? We do have a couple. For action items, after the introduction of the item, the council will accept public comments, then take questions from the council before moving to motions and discussion. Keep that in mind. And secondly, please speak clearly and one person at a time. This is all being recorded. Thirdly, please keep audio muted unless you are recognized by the chair. How do we keep it muted? We don't need to do that, right?
Because we don't have the ability to
Okay.
do that.
And then AI note-taking bots may not be used during the meeting until formal state policy is accepted or is adopted. And then please use your full names instead of acronyms during discussion and presentations so everyone knows what we're talking about. Thank you, Kim, for roll call. I think we'll move on to our new member introductions, which again, we'll let Misty go at the end here, and our roundtable updates. Remember, our roundtable updates are a chance to hear about you and your agency updates. So introduce yourself, tell us a little about you and your work, and I'll go ahead and start as an example. So I am Randy Shipman. I'm the superintendent of the Dillon Elementary School District. And we just ended school on Friday, so that was great. As a superintendent, I remained in school the whole summer, but it's much easier without a bunch of kids and a bunch of staff and a bunch of parents around. But we will be closing out this year budget-wise and getting ready for next year. One of the biggest meetings we have is in August, which is our big budget meeting for that coming year. We had an interesting year. As I told you guys earlier, we lost a child in September right out of the gate. So that was kind of tough. But we're recovering from that. And other than that, we've had really a pretty darn good year. That's a tough one to recover from. But all in all, we had a great year. We're kind of moving into the summer planning phase right now, at least for me. Our staff is for the most part out. They'll spend this week kind of closing their rooms down and things like that. And then they'll need to get out so we can start cleaning over the summer. Just involved in some other things like this committee and our ACES Task Force Committee and our 406 Youth Coalition in Dillon is really up and running. Lila Giberson, one of our members here, is a big part of that. And our kids have done a lot of good in our county and even in Madison County. So that's it with me, Tina. We'll just kind of go.
What happened last week?
Well, and last week we won the state championship in baseball. So that was a bummer. We were 18-0-1 going into that game. We had won our first game, a tough game, came back in extra innings to beat Whitefish 5-3. Next day we came back in extra innings to win 5-4 in a walk-off in the bottom of the seventh by a freshman. And then we played, that was against Columbia Falls. Then we played Big Fork for the state championship. First time the Beavers baseball team's ever been in it. And first time Big Fork too. The high school baseball, if you don't know, is only 4 years old. And we were in our fourth season and Big Fork was in their third. But anyways, we lost a tough one 7-2 in the state championship. So that was tough, but yeah, that was a big deal. All right, now we'll move on to Tina.
Hi, Tina Hayes. I know it says Tina Evelyn, but I've been married for a couple of years, and so Tina. I work for the Montana Safe School Center as the associate director. We've been super busy. We have things coming up. We're working on legislation right now. Working very closely with the Education Interim Committee to help improve school safety. And so just doing lots and lots of trainings across the state and also becoming an ALICE trainer. So if any schools in your area need ALICE training, please let me know because I will be trained in that as of next week. I also sit on the school board for Missoula County Public Schools, and we did win our baseball.
Sentinel, which is one of the teams we beat this year, a double A team.
Yeah, so sorry.
Sorry.
We're the champions.
Sentinel was good.
I did go to the conference with Jeremy, the national conference in Washington, D.C., and walked away with lots of information. If anybody cares to hear a spiel, I can give a spiel. But focus really on prevention and working with schools and community and law enforcement. There are a lot of different technical assistance groups that are really gearing up and willing to help. It was a really great conference. I really enjoyed it, learned a lot. And I would encourage everybody to go to one of these national conferences because I think that you can bring back a lot of information. And it would be really cool because there were a lot of, like Idaho brought almost their entire state advisory group. So it was pretty cool. But with that, Jeremy and I had been looking at some grants that the OJJDP had released. There's two of them. There's the Juvenile Justice System Enhancements, which is 1.4 million. It's for 36 months. And it's really to support states to improve the efficiency and cost effectiveness of juvenile justice system operations by implementing targeted solutions to high cost drivers. That one is due, I believe on the 15th, June 15th. The other one to look at was the Youth Gang Prevention and Intervention Program. That one had two different levels of awards. It was 500,000. And then, the other category was 500,000. So there's intervention. So thinking about our communities, especially in Eastern Montana and Yellowstone County, dealing with, youth gangs. But that is due Friday. So
This coming Friday.
this coming Friday. But I think what I would love to see as an advisory group, that we stay up to date on these grants that are coming out so that we can really help advise, like, do we want to go after this grant? Is this grant going to be helpful for Montana, and hopefully get more money for that? So,
Are you gonna talk more, or, so you have, I mean, I don't know about the timing, I don't even know how that would work.
well, I guess we have that discussion, like, can it be feasibly done? We have to, I think, vote on it. As an advisory group, is that right, Kayla?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the agency standpoint, I don't feel like we're in a good place to apply for additional monies right now. I think we just hiring a grant section supervisor. I think looking at our internal processes to create some consistency across all of our programs that we administer. So our juvenile justice, our victim service section, and our public safety grants. And so I like just being still relatively new to take some time, hire our section supervisor over at the grant administration, and just really dive into like looking at our current processes that we have. We're also going to be doing a review of our policy and procedures. So I think from a standpoint from the agency internally, I think I would just recommend giving us some time to look at our current processes that we have, and then get us in a good place to really be able to administer the monies really well. But in the future, when we have that discussion, or there are grants like this, then I would advise that we put it on as an action item, that the public has good notice, and then we have it out there that we are going to act.
So to your point about keeping apprised of those grants coming out.
Well, I guess, could you give us like a timeline? And the fact that we only meet quarterly is concerning, because these grants come out and sometimes they're not forecasted, or they're forecasted and they don't come out, and then they come out randomly. Especially right now in the current climate that we're in. How do we go about doing that if we're only meeting quarterly? And being able to have us move forward on something if something comes out, say, in July, and we don't meet until September, and the due date is September.
Yeah, I think one way is, on our end, we can be more proactive in looking at opportunities like that. If it needs to go as we work the process of cleaning up the YJC bylaws and our committees to get it more streamlined, that could be a process where maybe it fits within the executive committee. So we have like executive committee meeting to have that conversation, and the executive committee can, in some capacities like the board, make decisions on behalf of the council. So I think there's opportunities to figure out what that looks like, or maybe it's something that we apply for, we just go ahead and apply for it. It's just a conversation I think we need to have, but I would just advise currently that we wait until, just to give us more time as an agency to look at what we're currently doing and making sure we're doing it really well.
Okay.
And on the conference, that was supported by this body, correct?
Yeah.
So just a reminder to everyone out there that if there is a conference, and Jeremy keeps us pretty apprised of that, if there's a conference that you're interested in going to, this council may be able to support that, so take advantage of that. Sam,
Sam Hofto, I am the director of Ted Lechner Youth Services Center, which is the shelter care youth detention facility that serves South Central Montana. We are a regional facility, 24 beds on the detention side, 15 beds on the shelter care side. Currently, we have 18 in about 9 minutes. We'd be down to 15 on the detention side with 3 headed to Pine Hills, and on the shelter care side, we have 7. So we've been very busy recently. A lot of in and out on the detention side and the shelter care side. We're bringing in what we can throughout the state. I come from a law enforcement background. I did 28 years at the Yellowstone County Sheriff's Office, retiring as the undersheriff, and I was a previous jail commander. We definitely got our hands full in Yellowstone County with crime, and we're a couple of things that I'm seeing that Jeremy and I had a conversation about prior to the meeting was the lack of reentry programs for these kids getting out of Pine Hills. It is amazing how quickly I see these kids back once they're released from Pine Hills back in the detention side. And the juvenile probation officers utilizing the shelter care sites as essentially a pre-release. That's not what we were made for, but we try to do what we can to help out. But if we can make some changes in that area, I hope to see that the number of kids drop of reoffending, that sort of situation. But I'm new to the council here. I'm happy to be here to do what I can and bring what I can in my law enforcement field and move forward. Thanks for having me.
well, we're happy to have you, Sam. Thank you. George, you want to go next?
My name is George Reilbert III. I'm one of the Bighorn County Commissioners. So my district is Southern Bighorn County, so I have the reservation, coal mines. Most of the state parks that are in my county are 2 of them. And I guess I'm the local government representative, so I come from Lodgegrass. It's my hometown, and you know, you work at Ted Lechner Center, and I had an old commissioner when I first came in. He said, "You always make sure you leave money in that budget for juvenile, because some kids need a little TLC." And so I was kind of a line. Yeah, I remember to this day, and I think we're like a consortium of a couple counties, right? That all feed into Ted Lechner. So in some years, you know, you might have one person in there, then another time we might have 3 or 4 persons, you know, and that bill can affect our budget quick. We're actually just starting our budgets right now. We're out with the departments, so that's the whole process we're going through. We just got through with our primary, some scares around home. Are we doing the longer session first, or just the intros right now?
Well, I probably messed that up, but let's just continue with the longer one.
All right, with the long one. So, you know, like there was like some election site scares yesterday across the state, and it's pulled across the country. And we were one of them where we had to lock down one of our communities for a short period. So I was with my road supervisor. He had his, overhead lights and turned on, and anyone that wanted to stop off of I-90, we had them, like, if you're not moving through, then you can't go in. So once that was lifted, then I went to the courthouse. So it was a busy day yesterday in our section of the state. So, you know, commissioners kind of do everything, you know, roads, ambulances, fires. I oversee all the other departments in the courthouse. So keep them pretty busy. So
So everything turned out all right?
Yes. Elections were, we can't close our doors because they got still until 8 o'clock, so.
And you are responsible for all the safety of the courthouse, the people in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've done a number of security upgrades to lock down the building. I think that one's gonna be installed probably this year, where one person can lock the whole thing down. Right now, we gotta call IT or somebody and have them get on a computer and turn it. You don't know, what might happen in our buildings, we're the public. People come to us, they're able to come into our offices, so. We've actually talking different levels of security for our public buildings.
Thank you, George. Appreciate you being here. Marissa, you wanna, we're gonna save, Misty for the last. Marissa, you wanna go?
Good morning, everyone. Marissa Bostwick, Montana Office of Public Instruction. My title is Federal Grants Coordinator, although I wear a few hats here. The hats that pertain to this council are Title I-D, neglected, delinquent, and at risk federal funding, and I'm the state foster care point of contact. Two things before we move forward. I just want to give a shout out to Randy. He will be spotlighted at the Summer Institute in June for the amazing work that he's doing with Title V funding, which is funding for rural schools. Dillon Elementary is really doing amazing things, so I just have to say that while I see him. And also to Sam at Ted Lechner, they will be spotlighted for Title I-D funding for the way that they're using their funding at Ted Lechner. Just really innovative, great ways that this funding is being used to support students that really need it. So kudos to Sam and Randy. It's really great work's happening. So I'm glad to be here today, and that is about all for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Marissa, and that's awfully kind of you. Congratulations, Sam, but Marissa, probably with you, also with me, is doing all the work, so.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Marissa. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Bree, do you wanna?
Oh, yeah.
Go
Sorry, I
ahead.
wasn't sure if you said my name. Yeah. Hi, I'm Bree Schulman. I am a counselor, mental health counselor over in Missoula. I've been with the council for a few years now, specifically looking at alternatives to incarceration and other prevention methods, especially for teens. Right now, what I'm working on is teaming up with Free Cycles, which is a nonprofit community bike shop in Missoula. We're working on creating outdoor youth programming that really focuses on empowering youth, and at the same time, I've found that empowerment and accountability are really opposite sides of the same coin. Right. Ultimately, I think it comes down to taking responsibility for what's inside of your control and knowing that you have that responsibility. So that said, the bike program that we're working on doing, I think I mentioned this last time, but the first week you'll build a bike from just scrap donated pieces. The second week you'd go on a bike packing expedition where you're learning emotional regulation, group dynamics, assertive communication, and impact on the ecological environment as well. And then the third piece would be coming back and doing some aspect of a community impact project where whatever that kid is passionate about, whether it's building a bike or frogs or conflict resolution or drawing, whatever it might be, they're leading some kind of project in the community to notice how they also have a responsibility to contribute to everyone's wellness, which gets really highlighted when you're living in the backcountry for a while. So that's what I'm continuing to work on, noticing that as youth struggle with accountability, they're also struggling massively with empowerment. And I view a lot of that as having to do with technology. So that is what I'm continuing to work on. Thanks.
Thank you, Bree. Director Bragg, is she here? Should we take a break and go to the presentation? and then come back to those.
That's fine.
So, Judge Nicely, thank you for joining us. Mike and Misty and Rachel and Christy, we're gonna take a break in our roundtable discussions to go to a presentation by Molly and Carly, and I'll let them introduce themselves better. They're with the National Assessment Center Association. Unless Jeremy or Director Bragg, do you want to introduce anything on?
Carly, thanks for coming in and giving this presentation to give us kind of an overview of what kind of what the assessment centers are and kind of what they do. So thank you so much for taking time to come in and just give us some information.
Yes, thank you, Carly. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning. You're stuck with me today. Molly is unfortunately not able to join, but I am really excited to be able to talk with you today about assessment centers. I do have some slides that I'm going to go through. I'm going to try to touch on a lot of different aspects of assessment centers. I will definitely provide some examples of what assessment centers look like in practice from all different parts of the country, but really trying to touch on a bunch of, the framework, how assessment centers operate, things to consider if you're really looking at planning and implementing an assessment center, things like that. So these slides will be shared with you after today. There's time for questions, but if you have questions that are specific to something that I'm talking about, please don't hesitate to jump in or drop something in the chat and we will go from there. The only other thing before I start sharing my screen is I'm going to use the term assessment center. We are called the National Assessment Center Association. That's very much connected to the history of these centers, but they go by many different names. So many communities will call them family resource centers. And then other communities will actually give them local names. So in Georgia, for example, one of the assessment centers is called the Front Porch. In other communities, they go by many, many different names. The Link, for example, Youth and Family Resource Center. So I'm going to use the term assessment centers just for shorthand, but know that they go by many different names, and this will kind of show up when I provide some examples of what they actually look like in practice. So let's hope technology works. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. How does that look? Everyone's able to see?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So also a quick introduction to the NAC, or the National Assessment Center Association. We were founded in 2020, with a mission to strengthen communities and really be a membership organization for communities that have assessment centers and that are aiming to prevent unnecessary systems involvement by connecting youth and families to the right supports. Assessment centers have been around for about 30 years, and there's been an incredible evolution of assessment centers. But up until the NAC was formed, all of that was really happening in isolation. So the aim of the NAC is really to kind of pull together assessment centers from across the nation and to kind of provide an opportunity not only to kind of establish and promote some best practices, which is the framework that I will talk about today, but also to really facilitate peer-to-peer networking so that assessment centers everywhere can learn from one another. We also provide technical assistance and training to communities that are in the exploration, developing, or operationalizing and sustaining centers. We offer a lot of virtual trainings and on-site trainings and other resources to really support fidelity to the assessment center framework. And then, of course, work with partners at all different levels to support youth-centered community-based responses. At this point, there are probably around 130 or so assessment centers across the nation, and over 70% of those assessment centers engage with the NAC as members. So pretty significant involvement across the country at assessment centers, and a lot of that peer-to-peer work. We do a lot of, just to kind of highlight the peer-to-peer piece, part of it, of course, you know, and I'm assuming or guessing that if you all do decide to explore assessment centers further, one of the next steps and one of the first things that we do around peer-to-peer is actually connecting communities that are in that exploration phase with other communities or states that are similar across a number of dimensions to kind of facilitate some of that early learning and answer some questions early on around what assessment centers could look like in practice. Many communities that are exploring assessment centers are really aiming to solve one of these three problems. The first is fragmented systems. So, you know, youth and families are often coming into contact with different systems, whether it's the justice system or it's school discipline or child welfare, behavioral health, other community supports, and really, you know, being asked to repeat their stories, being asked to navigate community resources on their own. Assessment centers in practice are intended to solve that problem by really kind of serving as a hub for youth and families and supporting them with navigating all of the community resources that they might need. Centers also aim to solve the kind of inconsistent diversion or individual discretionary challenges around decision-making related to diversion. This is globally diversion from punitive systems. So this can be diversion from school disciplinary procedures that would lead to suspension or expulsion. This is diversion from deeper involvement with child welfare system or diversion from the juvenile justice system. Other centers aim to really kind of solve the inappropriate context. So law enforcement, you know, they are often called into situations because they will respond and are often the primary point of contact for youth who are in crisis. Many assessment centers also serve a function for law enforcement to really serve as that off-ramp. So even if law enforcement is the primary point of contact for a young person in crisis, that doesn't necessarily have to lead to further involvement in the justice system, but can actually lead or serve as an opportunity to divert them to an assessment center and then connect the youth and families to community-based resources. We know that justice system involvement negatively affects the entire course of a young person's life. And assessment centers, you know, 30 years ago were really intended or initially established to support diversion from the justice system. And they really continue to serve in most communities as that off-ramp to justice system involvement, in addition to kind of some upstream work as well. So an assessment center conceptually serves two broad functions. Both of these functions are a hub function, but they're a hub function in different ways. So when we think about a hub function or connection function for youth and families, we're talking about at the individual level, working with youth and families to identify what is going on in the young person's life and their at home. That might be drivers of behaviors, and working then with that youth and family to facilitate access to community-based services, supports, and resources to try to get at some of the drivers of behaviors that are causing the young person to come into contact with these more punitive systems. So that's the hub function or the navigation function for youth and families. The hub function for communities is that the assessment centers are neutral. They are not service providers. So they are really intended to serve that kind of cross systems collaboration connection function by really collaborating with all of the different systems and community stakeholders to facilitate efficient use of resources and to identify and help develop community capacity for the full range of services that youth and families might need in the community. And I'll talk a little bit more about that one later on. So assessment centers aim to prevent and divert youth from the child welfare and justice system, as well as, you know, early upstream, divert them for kind of prevent or keep youth in schools. by identifying needs, so identifying the underlying issues through use of validated screening and assessment tools, and then partnering with youth and families to connect them to individualized services and resources in the community, and then leveraging the data, leveraging what they know about the needs of youth and families to really support that capacity building across organizations to reduce duplication and improve access to community supports. The assessment center framework, which is the kind of best practice, establishing best practices piece that I talked about early on in terms of the goal of the NAC, or one of the primary functions of the NAC, establishes these 5 core components of an assessment center. These look different in practice, but all assessment centers adhere to these 5 core components. The 3 process core components are that the assessment center serves as a single point of contact for all youth who have been identified in a target population, and I'll explain that more in a minute. That all youth who enter the assessment center go through a comprehensive screening and assessment process to identify what some of the underlying needs might be, and that case management or service navigation is then provided to help youth and families connect with the range of services, supports, and resources in the community that have been identified through that screening and assessment process. The structural core components are around accountability, meaning that the assessment center is using data to ensure that they are appropriately identifying the needs and really leveraging the community-based resources and support, so that data becomes a huge driver for kind of not only practice within the assessment center, but also the data's driving capacity building in the community, and that staff are provided with the right training and opportunities to be able to provide trauma-informed engagement processes and really work well with youth and families. So the first core process component, single point of contact, is really pointing to this idea that an assessment center is this neutral, centralized, community-recognized hub where youth are directed for this systematic screening, assessment, and service matching process. So it's really important that it's centralized, meaning that all youth who meet certain criteria are referred to the assessment center through policy, that it's recognized by systems level partners, that it serves a neutral function. This is where the assessment centers are not service providers is incredibly important. So assessment centers are truly neutral, neutral from like a youth and family perspective, meaning that they are not part of the punitive system, like, you know, they're not connected necessarily to juvenile court or to child welfare or to the school discipline processes, but they're neutral from those systems. But then also neutral in terms of they are not service providers, so there's no competition with those local community resources and supports. And then in general, they're doing this before formal processing. This is a very busy slide, but I think it gives you an idea of how assessment centers can serve as that single point of contact across prevention, diversion, and early intervention decision points. So assessment centers in many communities, and I'm going to start right in the middle actually, will serve that diversionary function, right? So whether we're talking about law enforcement drop-off, so law enforcement comes into contact with a young person, in many communities that have assessment centers, law enforcement have the ability to either refer or to bring and drop off a young person to the assessment center as an alternative to bringing them to detention or as an alternative to arrest. Many communities who've started off in that diversionary bucket or that diversionary referral pathway have actually started to look upstream and are doing a lot more work in the prevention arena. So thinking about how can you create opportunities for self-referrals or families to refer when something's going on, but then also working very much with schools and with hospitals where some of those earlier behaviors might be present, and creating, again, a very kind of clear referral pathway from school disciplinary processes or, you know, just schools in general. If a kid is chronically absent, to be able to refer them to the assessment center, but also from hospitals who might be seeing the effects of community or family violence. Assessment centers also can serve early intervention, meaning even if a young person is going to continue to go through the court system, so more of that traditional processing, there's usually a gap between arrest and whenever there's a disposition in the case. In those communities, assessment centers can serve as that kind of early intervention, meaning that the assessment center can work with the youth and families to connect them to services early, even while the case might be proceeding through the court system, for example. Once a youth enters the assessment center, there are, depending again on how the assessment center is structured in that community, and how it's staffed. This is really a staffing decision. Their assessment centers will fall into one of two categories. They either are a tier 1 assessment center, which means that they only serve that screening function. Screening is something that is very brief. There are many quick validated tools that can identify immediate needs and flag potential needs that would need a further assessment. So we're talking about behavioral health, safety, basic needs, suicidal ideation, exploitation, trauma exposures, things like that, flagging them, and then determining if a further assessment is needed. Staff in a tier 1 assessment center do not need to be clinical staff. And so there are many centers that kind of fall into this tier 1. Tier 2 assessment centers do both that screening to kind of look globally, holistically at what the range of needs might be, but they also have clinical staff that can really kind of conduct those more comprehensive, individualized biopsychosocial assessments and really develop that much deeper look at what might be going on for youth and families. Both of these, tier 1 and tier 2, very much can drive an individualized case plan. Although the tier 1 centers will often then work with the person that they're making that referral to for the further assessment to kind of help inform some of that individualized case planning. Once the screening and assessment has been completed, assessment centers work with youth and families to develop individualized case plans based on the results of the screening and/or assessment. And then for a short period of time, typically under 60 days, some assessment centers, it's more like 90 days, but the goal here is a short-term case management to really work with the youth and families around service navigation. So this is not just identifying potential needs through screening and assessment and then saying, here, call this person or go to this service provider, but actually continuing to work with the youth and families to make sure that those initial referrals, that the youth and families are able to actually access the resources, that they're able to address any barriers that come up. And if for one reason or another, one of the services is not a good fit, that they can pivot with the youth and families and continue to identify how can they actually connect the youth and family with a service or resource that can help to meet that need. Part of this case management and thinking about this hub function as well, assessment centers are really tasked with developing and maintaining community partnerships. So having a really strong network of vetted providers across therapeutic, educational, and basic needs services to ensure that when a young person or family flags in and identifies as having a particular need, that the assessment center is able to help that young person and that family identify a resource that can meet that need. And again, be able to stick with them to ensure that it is a need that can be, that they're able to access that resource. I've probably used the word neutral many times already. You'll probably hear me say that again. Assessment centers are not service providers. Neutrality is incredibly important for building trust, not only with other systems partners and community resources, but also with youth and families. Neutrality that's structured helps really support this idea of objective review of what might be going on with the youth and families through that standardized screening process, structured resource matching, But the goal here is really that assessment centers are not, this is not an intake process. So assessment centers are not doing the screening and assessment and case management to refer within their own programs. They're not competing with community-based resources, but they're really kind of serving that hub function, again, for both youth and families to navigate services, but also that hub function across community service providers. Without neutrality, assessment centers just become another agency, and some of that critical kind of capacity, community capacity building function can get lost. So neutrality builds trust with families, recognizing that assessment centers, their role is really to just help identify what's going on with youth and families and to connect to them to services. So it serves as that bridge between families and systems. Trusted by agencies. So, especially if referral partners are going to be, if assessment centers are going to serve as that single point of contact, agencies can really understand or recognize and trust that the assessment center is going to conduct that comprehensive screening and assessment and connect and stick with youth and families long enough to navigate them or support navigation to resources in the community. The other piece that's also important around neutrality is that centers, and this is also related to that core component around accountability, that assessment centers are ensuring that the resources, their network in the community is able to provide quality services that are able to really meet the needs of the youth and families who are being referred to them. Assessment centers look very different in different communities. Assessment centers there are assessment centers in incredibly urban communities. We're talking Philadelphia and San Francisco, New Orleans. They are also located in urban and rural communities, and then also in frontier communities as well. So there are assessment centers in Idaho in primarily frontier communities. So they look very different in terms of how they're actually structured, where they are, their location, and what the process looks like. Access to assessment centers should not depend on transportation, schedule, or system familiarity. So in some communities, most communities, the assessment center does have at least one kind of central bricks and mortar location. Many also offer mobile intake. Especially in more rural communities, you're going to see a lot of co-location, whether it's in schools, it's in courts, it's in recreational centers. And then in some of the more frontier communities, there's also a lot of use of telehealth. Depending on the target population and how the assessment center is structured to serve that single point of contact, the process can be appointment-based, it can be crisis, drop-in, walk-in. There can be law enforcement transportation, and some also offer an after-hours on-call service. And I'll talk a little bit, I'll give an example of what that can look like and why the after-hours on-call services kind of come about in a lot of communities. I'm going to skip this slide. This is just talking more about the single point of contact and get a little bit into the structural core components, which I've mentioned. Accountability is use of data, but it's also very much around inclusive governance. So assessment centers have governance boards that include cross-systems leadership. So absolutely representative of all of the systems or decision makers that will be making referrals to the assessment center, but also community stakeholders who will be receiving referrals from the assessment center. Governance boards also include youth and family, so that all points, whether it's the referrers, the people who will be referred, or the services and systems that will be receiving referrals, are all part of that governance board of an assessment center. That there's use of data to regularly monitor referral patterns and outcomes. And I'll talk a little bit about what the NAC is doing to kind of support that regular monitoring. And that all of this is codified through MOUs and written protocols. It's also really important for staff development that the assessment center process and that kind of in-person direct engagement with youth and families is grounded in a strengths-focused, trauma-informed approach. That staff are trained in motivational interviewing and on working with youth and families, that they're trained in adolescent development and really understanding how young people grow and change, and that they're committed to cultural humility and equitable practice, and that this is all structured through opportunities for ongoing professional development and regular supervision. I'm going to provide a couple of examples of different how assessment centers look in practice. This is the JAC, which serves the 18th and 23rd. The JAC is the Juvenile Assessment Center. It serves the 18th and 23rd Judicial District in Colorado, which includes both urban, suburban, and also rural communities extending all the way out to the Kansas border. This assessment center just celebrated its 25th anniversary, so it's one of the assessment centers that's been around the longest. It serves both, thinking back to that very busy slide that I shared earlier in terms of referral pathways. The JAC serves both the prevention, the prevention, diversion, and early intervention pathways, and has incredibly strong partnerships with juvenile justice, primarily law enforcement through their law enforcement program, but also schools and child welfare. So really work with all systems partners. They operate 2 programs. The first program, which is the one that the JAC was really established for, is the law enforcement program, which serves as a drop-off for all youth who would be sent to detention or would be processed through detention in the 18th and 23rd Judicial District. So there's transport by law enforcement. It's open 24/7 for all anyone who would be, ages 10 to 17, which is the ages that could be arrested and brought to detention by law enforcement. They serve about 1,400 youth annually and are really looking at kind of risk and protective factors through that assessment, but also doing some basic screening, including their detention screening. The law enforcement program will also take direct referrals from law enforcement who come into contact with youth, but the young person might not be transported directly. So the program can continue to kind of conduct that screening and assessment. They also have a community assessment program, which at this point is probably about 15 to 20 years old. So a little bit, it's been around for quite a while, but still newer. And this really works heavily with schools and child welfare. I accept referrals from all community partners. This is an appointment-based program, Monday through Friday, kind of general business hours plus after school, and serves not only that 10 to 17, but all school-aged youth. So a much broader swath. So really kind of thinking about engaging youth and connecting with them in that more prevention realm further upstream. Serves approximately 1,200 youth annually, and this is staffed by a clinical team who really is conducting that much deeper biopsychosocial assessment and providing that short-term case management to connect youth and families to resources in the community. This is the Youth and Family Resource Center in Shelby County, Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. This is a great example of how an assessment center, through that policy piece that I was talking about earlier, can really serve as a structured single point of contact. This assessment center opened in 2022, 2021, I think. So it's been open, 4 or 5 years at this point, and really just serve as a diversionary function for law enforcement. There was agreement in Shelby County and Memphis that all youth who would be charged with any of these 15 eligible offenses, which include things like simple assault, criminal trespass, disorderly conduct, shoplifting, vandalism, curfew, marijuana possession. Any youth who would be charged with those particular offenses is diverted to the Youth and Family Resource Center in lieu of arrest. So youth ages 10 to 17, the law enforcement will actually bring the youth to the Family Resource Center instead of arrest. The Memphis Police Department is the primary referral source. They use the CANS assessment to really kind of, again, which is strengths and needs-based, looking at what some of the drivers of behavior might be, and then provide that short-term case management and service navigation function. They are not 24/7. They are open Monday through Friday from 8:30 to 4 p.m. I should jump back. The JAC in Colorado is a nonprofit. So this sits outside of the government realm. This is structured as a nonprofit. About 85% of assessment centers are structured as a government operated, county operated center. The JAC in Colorado is one of the 15% that operates as a nonprofit. The Youth and Family Resource Center in Shelby County, Tennessee is county funded and county operated. The MARC in Calcasieu Parish has been around for over 25 years now, 20 years at this point. This is the Multi-Agency Resource Center in Calcasieu Parish, which is St. Charles. It's the kind of lower western part of Louisiana near the Texas border. This was initially started again to serve this kind of juvenile justice diversion function. They're actually, it's county operated, county run, and it's on the same property as the juvenile detention facility, but in a different building. And it was really intended to serve as this drop off for law enforcement and diversion from detention, diversion from the court system. Over time, they have really kind of moved further upstream and are doing a lot more prevention work. The majority of the referrals at this point are from the schools, where they are, their target population, thinking about how this can be structured through policy and protocol. Their target population is any young person who is caught with a vape or marijuana or other drugs on school property. All of those are diverted from school disciplinary procedures to the MARC for screening, assessment, and connection to services and resources. They also offer walk-in and phone referrals so families can initiate support. They're open Monday through Saturday with a 24-hour helpline. And this decision, it used to be 24/7. This decision was primarily driven by data, and they identified that Sundays and I think the hours of like 1 a.m. to 5 a.m., they weren't ever really, they were staffing the MARC, but they weren't ever actually receiving referrals. So they've moved to this Monday through Saturday and 24-hour helpline. They serve basically school-age children ages 5 through 18. They have a multidisciplinary approach. They do have clinical staff. And because of where they are located, they have a heavy emphasis on human trafficking screening. You can see some of the impact data that they have since they've opened. Over 11,000 youth have been diverted from the courts. And you can see the 68% of status referrals are down, 42% petitions are down, 36% detention down, and then diversions are up as well. And this is all just court impact from the court, or impact on the court process. This is the JAC, also Juvenile Assessment Center, also been in operation for about 25 years in Douglas County, Nebraska. This assessment center serves a very particular function of the diversion from point of contact with the Douglas County Attorney's Office. So really that kind of prosecutorial diversionary function. They strive to divert all youth eligible from formal processing. So they're really diverting pretty much every youth who's not charged with a felony. All youth who are referred to the JAC, you can see here are their exclusionary criteria, who are already in the adjudicatory phase for a previous citation, or are being detained, or under the supervision of an alternative to detention, or the current citation is charged with a delinquent act that involves sexual assault. They are open Monday through Friday. They are appointment-based, given again where they sit in the continuum and their target population. Since they've opened, they did a cost-benefit analysis. They've searched 28,000 youth, and they've saved $1.4 million per year among all of those youth who were diverted. And 77% of the youth who have been served by the JAC do not escalate into the juvenile justice system after they're connected with youth, with community-based resources and supports. And then I threw this slide in. This is a teaser where we have a webinar tomorrow that I would encourage anyone who's interested in learning a lot more about the Idaho Assessment Centers. We have a webinar tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern that's anyone can join. That's going to be looking at 3 Idaho Assessment Centers and an evaluation that was just conducted by the Urban Institute. In 2022, Idaho appropriated $6.5 million to establish assessment centers statewide, really with the exception of the bridge, which was established before that, going from concept to 12 operating assessment centers in under 3 years. The bridge was the exception to that. They were established before. This is in Ada County, Idaho. They are prevention focused. They are county run. They are a tier 1, meaning they're only doing that screening function. And a little bit of data here just to kind of highlight who they're working with. 650 referrals in 2024. Primarily receiving referrals from law enforcement and SRO. It's only almost about half of their referrals. About a quarter of their referrals are coming from schools, and then the other quarter is primarily coming from family self-referrals and other community organizations. They have a very comprehensive screening process. They're looking at behavioral health needs, basic needs, trauma, suicidal ideation, so kind of risks as well, safety, looking at some kind of drivers of school refusal. And then they provide case management through the individualized plans with a warm handoff to community providers. And they've used some state funds to start up and then are operated using county general funds for ongoing operation. So thinking about this, kind of going back to this hub idea and the function that the assessment center serves as a hub. It's really important, and the governance function as well. It's really important to think about, from concept through planning, through implementation, engaging all of the stakeholders that gain something from a well-designed assessment center. So engaging youth and families, again, not just in that individual one-on-one, but really engaging youth and families throughout the planning process and the implementation and operationalization of an assessment center, law enforcement, schools, community providers, service providers, and really thinking about what it is that they each gain from that well-designed assessment center. So youth and families gain access to the right supports without having to repeatedly navigate the systems. Law enforcement have an alternative to arrest or detention, and can ensure that young people will still have their needs met and be able to be connected to youth and families. Schools, there's a lot that's been done in schools. I don't know a whole lot about what you all have been working on in Montana, but I know generally what we hear in most states is that there's been a whole lot of focus in schools in really trying to kind of improve identification and access and social emotional learning and all of that, but sometimes a student's needs fall outside of the scope of what a school can identify or provide. And then certainly for students who are not engaging in school, so attendance is a problem that becomes a challenge for schools to be able to identify. So that's where an assessment center can really kind of fill that gap. Courts, you saw through the data from a lot of the assessment centers, a well-designed assessment center that's really operating as intended will reduce caseloads, can, for youth who are going to continue through, so that early intervention function, if they're going to continue through the court system, can, provide better informed decision-making, and youth can arrive with needs who are already identified. And then for service providers, it's better match referrals, reduce no-shows because there's that navigation function, and youth who are already arriving with clear needs and potentially biopsychosocial assessments already completed. In terms of operations of an assessment center, they look very different. When I was describing the assessment centers in practice, I pulled out at least one that is a nonprofit. Many are government, some are hybrid models. This really affects governance, funding flexibility, and how, how the assessment center might engage with certain community stakeholders. The hours and access range in terms of, is it 24/7? Is it appointment based? Does it accept law enforcement transport? Is it telescreening? What does that really look like? Staffing models are going to determine if it's a tier 1 or tier 2. So are these non-clinical staff or clinical staff? Case managers, navigators, supervisors, really will be dependent on exactly what problem the assessment center is intended to solve in the community. Physical location will vary, again, depending on the community itself that the assessment center is going to serve. And then referral protocols will also, really look different depending on if it's schools or child welfare or hospitals or law enforcement or the courts. In terms of funding and sustainability, we always get questions around how assessment centers are funded. Pretty much every assessment center is braiding and blending funding. The majority of the funding comes from local and state government. Sometimes federal government, especially around startup, there are grants and other opportunities, but also drawing on flexible funds to be able to kind of support some aspects or some, populations, young people who might be coming through the assessment center, especially for assessment centers that are nonprofit. They will also leverage philanthropy dollars, foundation grants. But then assessment centers are very often leveraging some of the dollars from the systems that are going to be sending young people to the assessment center, whether it's juvenile justice, so law enforcement dollars or court dollars or, county attorney prosecutorial dollars, child welfare, education, and then potentially, again, especially for assessment centers that have clinical staff and are serving that tier 2 function and case management. Assessment centers also can draw down Medicaid dollars for billing. So a lot of braiding and blending funds. The NAC supports assessment centers with that continuous quality improvement and through the establishment of standardized performance and outcome measures through ACORN. We love our acronym, Assessment Center Outcome and Reporting Network, or ACORN. Not only provides standardized performance and outcome measures, but we actually provide assessment centers with the tools to be able to collect all of the data. And we regularly work with assessment centers. You can see at this point, I'm going to not do quick math here for you. Around 20-ish assessment centers at this point that are regularly, quarterly submitting their data to the NAC, and we are providing them with dashboards and guidance around how to interpret their data to ensure that they are continually looking at their referral sources, their demographics, ensuring that the screening and assessment is in alignment with the role and purpose that they serve in the community, and that they're actually using those screening and assessment data to connect young people and families to the appropriate services in the community. And then also, of course, looking at long-term outcomes. So what does engagement in the assessment center mean in terms of re-referral and recidivism over a 12-month period? We also provide assessment centers with the opportunity to provide standardized surveys to youth and families to collect their feedback on the experience, to ensure that young people and families themselves are feeling like the process of going through the assessment center is in fact helpful. One quick slide on planning an assessment center. From all of our work with supporting communities through the process of exploring, planning, the initial implementation of an assessment center, and then kind of, really preparing for more of that sustainability. We've taken all of those lessons learned and developed a planning and implementation guide. the first kind of 5 steps that we recommend and that has really served communities well is first to really engage leadership across juvenile justice, child welfare, education, community organizations to ensure that all of the systems who would potentially be involved in or referring to the assessment center are at the table to really understand what an assessment center is and to determine if this is a model that would be appropriate for your community or your state, to define the population of need. So really identifying who are the youth and families who are not being served well or are most impacted by the current systems pathways, the current pathways to services or to systems, to map out what initiatives already exist so that the assessment center is not duplicating what's already underway, and that it's really leveraging all of the strengths that do exist in the community and it's filling a gap, not again creating that duplication. And then to really do an intervention mapping. So determining where and when youth are really looking at what does the current pathways look like. So mapping out how youth are coming into contact with different decision makers, what decision makers are, what data they have, what decisions they're making at those points, and then where there's an opportunity at each decision point meaning, again, law enforcement, probation intake, it could be school disciplinary processes, hospitals, things like that. Each decision point, where is there an opportunity? What would the target population be at that decision point to be able to create an alternative pathway? So a pathway to the assessment center where a young person can be screened, assessed, and connected to services. And if after getting through all of this, there continues to be a good match between the local need or the state need and the assessment center model, building that implementation team that represents the kind of diversity of systems, of community stakeholders, and of youth and families with lived experience to be able to construct and plan an assessment center that's representative of all of those different perspectives. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen if I can find the button. And I know there were some questions, which I will pull up. I can definitely send links for the webinar. And I will send that to Jeremy after today with a copy of the slides from today so that you can, for those who are interested, you can sign up for the webinar tomorrow and really hear very specifically about Idaho's experience. And then you can kind of take that in with all of the information I just shared as well.
Carly, thank you very much. Are there any questions online, Kim, in the chat?
Just the ones about the link to the webinar, which I will definitely share.
Okay, thank you, Carly. Looks like Tina has a question or comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You can. Okay.
Yep.
I work very closely with schools in doing threat assessment. And so just a couple of questions around that, because what happens when a school has started a threat assessment? Is there communication between the school and the threat assessment center? The assessment center?
There is. What the level of that communication is determined by the MOU. Whether it's, but in all cases, and this is where an assessment center, that neutrality piece is really important. All assessment centers, it's not just a pathway to the assessment center. There are always feedback loops that are built in. The level of detail of those feedback loops is really determined by the MOU.
Okay. And then, so you were talking about like telescreening, for places like rural Montana. So specifically thinking about a community, Turner, Montana, which is about an hour and a half from any services. Those assessment centers, I guess, are they set up that they know all the resources within that area for that telescreening? And then can you provide, I guess for those ones that are in rural areas, do they then provide most of their service via tele? because they don't have access to that in person.
Yes and yes. So assessment centers, they have an incredible responsibility to maintain a very comprehensive understanding of what services, what the network is, right? What services and resources are available in the community that they are serving. And conducting that regularly. So not just having a list, but kind of regularly engaging with all of the different service providers to understand real-time capacity. Not just does this service exist, but are they currently accepting new clients, and what is the wait list if they do have a wait list, for example. So very much responsible for understanding and maintaining an up-to-date network of service providers in any community where they would be conducting that telescreening. A lot of communities where either the service capacity for one reason or another is just incredibly low, or very rural, or frontier communities where the services just don't exist. That's where assessment centers build that network through telehealth providers. So really being able to connect young people to whatever service they might need electronically, virtually, so that they do in fact have a network of providers, even if the network isn't physically located in the community.
So do you find, sorry, I have one more. Do you find that in these communities that the assessment centers are located, that there has to be a lot of communication? Because I guess my concern would be that like the school does a threat assessment, the assessment center does an assessment. Is there constant communication between that school and the assessment center to make sure that the kid's not falling through the cracks or that services aren't duplicated?
Yes, and that is where having the assessment center's role clearly defined by the community and articulated in policy is incredibly important, so that some of that responsibility is actually transferred to the assessment center to actually do that deep dive and work very comprehensively with youth and families, and then to provide the information that needs to be provided back to system stakeholders. So in a lot of the community example, like the examples that I gave of assessment centers and what they look like in different communities, their system stakeholders, the partners who are actually making the referrals to the assessment centers, are not doing their own assessments. They are entrusting the assessment center staff to do that comprehensive deep dive into really understanding what some of those drivers are, and then to feed the information back that system stakeholder needs. Not everything, but to share the right information back so that the system that made the referral can then make decisions around what else might need to be done. But that's where that kind of neutrality function and the policy and procedure piece are incredibly important, because a lot of that responsibility actually gets transferred to the assessment center.
Yeah, I think in Montana we'll have to be, if this is something moving forward, we're going to have to look at the law, because right now schools are required to do threat assessments by law. So figuring out how those assessment centers sit in those realms, and what laws or what legislation would have to be passed for the threat or for the assessment centers. So thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions before Director Bragg or Jeremy have some concluding comments? Any other questions?
Excuse
I
me,
have one, or sorry, go ahead, Judge Nicely.
Mr. Chair, sorry. Chairman, I'm so sorry. May I ask a question? Carly, have you visited these assessment centers? Some of them, I'm assuming you've been to some. I'm just wondering, I mean, I've been to Douglas counties. I'm wondering, and I want to read about the Idaho ones. I'm wondering, should this be a project that we were ever wanting to take on and find a place for, do you have, looking at what Montana's needs may be without doing a full assessment, any thoughts on the best design? I mean, they're designed very differently, and perhaps I'm sure we'd end up with a combination, but Have you been to them?
I've been to many assessment centers, and it's actually something that we do a lot of regularly, make sure that we're actually not just engaging with different assessment centers, but actually visiting them. And one of the things that I would suggest is if you do decide to move forward, depending on where you land with what would the role and function and purpose be of the assessment center, what, would it serve that prevention, diversion, early intervention role? What would the target population be? Would be to stay in contact with us so that we could connect you with other communities that have similarly situated assessment centers so that you can learn from what they have done, and maybe what's not worked. So you can take that into your planning discussions.
Thank you.
There is a question in the chat around if the process, a particular type of organization is best situated. And I would say that in general, we have found that the shared, I want to say this, the shared trust across system stakeholders and community is probably the most important factor for an organization that would operate an assessment center. In many communities, this is a county operated, but not necessarily within any particular, like not in the courts or part of the courts or in child welfare or part of child welfare, but a county operated adjacent to operation. There are other communities, though, where a nonprofit can very much serve this function, but it really is around having the trust of system stakeholders and trust of community resources, that whoever's operating this assessment center is truly serving in that neutral function.
For the record, I don't know if we needed, who asked that question?
I did. Oh,
Rita.
sorry, I did.
Okay.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
And then I have a question, Randy Shipman, to go along with Tina and Judge Nicely. So the biggest area it looks like is a county that one of these assessment centers would serve. Am I getting that right?
No, at the Jack in Colorado, for example, that judicial district covers, I think, 3 counties. So they're not necessarily limited by county. It depends on the state. Many cover multiple counties. Some it's judicial districts, which span multiple counties. So they look different in different communities.
Yeah, that's good to know, because obviously Montana being so rural, that's our issue, that's our problem. And a lot of them look like, Douglas County and Shelby County. And so that's good to know that it could be bigger. Any other questions for Carly? Director Bragg or Jeremy, any parting comments, questions?
No, the only thing I would say is we really appreciate you coming in. This is something that we've talked about, having some understanding of what they look like and what the possibilities are. Can't thank you enough for coming in and spending time with us and really laying out kind of what the groundwork potentially could be to do something like this, and knowing that we have multiple states around us that have a huge frontier piece. After having talked to you earlier, really, I think puts in perspective that this is a possibility, and maybe something that, like I said, we should dive deeper into, because at the end of the day, so much of Montana is that frontier areas, and we don't have services for kids. And what we do know is if kids touch the system, the chances of going deeper go up exponentially. And so the possibility of almost reflecting them, even as opposed to diversion, is something that maybe we should really take a hard look at.
Thank you, Jeremy. Director Bragg?
I have a question. Carly, through the implementation and design of these in different communities, what has the victim advocate community, how do they feel about it? What does that collaboration look like for the victim advocates in with these nonprofits in these communities?
Yeah, well, I think it's important that, and drawing on some of the introductions that I've heard earlier, accountability, this is not diversion without accountability. There is accountability that's built into the assessment center process, especially if it's diversion from the juvenile justice system. And especially for like the Jack and Douglas County, I mean, there's certainly a strong victim component to that as well, the accountability and victim component, but recognizing too that, I don't think the court process necessarily is victim friendly either. And so there can be a restorative component, that victim component, and restorative justice component built into the assessment center, if that is the role that it serves, that kind of deeper diversion or early intervention function as well. And in those assessment centers, if that's going to be a core, an important voice, making sure that they're part of the governance of the assessment center.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you very much. Like Jeremy said, we appreciate your time. And I think she put in the chat, I'm assuming for tomorrow, the webinar.
I will do that now, and then I'll
okay.
Email. I'm not a good multitasker, so I'll mute and then I'll drop the link for the webinar tomorrow. And then I will also send an email to Jeremy so he has that as well. But hopefully we'll see some of you on the webinar, and thank you so much for the invitation today.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Once you get that on, you're more than welcome to stay in the meeting, or we will see you later. Thank you.
Thanks.
And then I think if it's okay with Director Bragg and Jeremy, we should probably jump to the action items before we move on with the roundtables, because I'm afraid we're going to lose a couple people and I don't know if we'll have a quorum. We have, I don't see Rachel. Is she? Okay, there's Rachel. Marissa, Judge Nicely, Mike, and who else was up there that I don't see? Christy. Is Christy gone?
Christy, yeah, yes.
Okay, is that
11 and 3 days at noon.
okay? So let's move. We will come back to the roundtable, but let's move on to our action items. Kayla, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little background on the minutes before moving to those action items.
Sure, Chair, committee members. So we have been looking at how we do minutes for the board and the YJC. On the agenda, you have that we are asking you to designate the audio recordings as official record of the meeting. And then as a agency, we're putting together minutes logs, and it's pursuant to 2-3-212 Montana Code annotated. So we would like to designate the audio as the official recording of the minutes, and then we're posting that online for the public. And so we have our admin staff that compile the video and audio recording, and then can get that up posted on our events calendar for the public to review, or YDC members or the board if you missed a meeting. And then we're pursuant to that statute, we're just creating a minutes log. That way the public can quickly access where in the Zoom that particular action item or topic is at. And this is just really helping us on pages and pages of writing minutes. Some of the struggles comes in with the Zoom transcript. We really have to take that. Kim has been doing a nice job at taking that, and it's a lot of editing and a lot of time that's put toward that to get it in a format that looks okay. But really, I think we could utilize the time that's spent on editing a Zoom transcript and really just have that minutes log and get it a more quicker timeline for the public to be able to access the meeting. So looking at just streamlining the process, we've in the past, the agency has attempted to use different AI tools to help with the Zoom transcript and taking the minutes, but it's just we hit roadblocks when it comes to getting them approved by IT. And so this just gives us a way to just a more efficient process in streamlining it. So before you is the action item to designate audio recordings moving here forward for YJC meetings and committee meetings. We'll have the audio as the official record of the meeting, and then we'll put together the minutes log. In your packet of materials, you do have what those logs look like. And so we'll ensure that they meet the statutory requirements, that we have the members present that were there, really the substance of those motions and things like that. But you have an example in your materials for the YJC meeting from the last meeting, and also the application review committee that we held on May 13th. Chair?
Okay, thank you, Director Bragg. I would entertain a motion, unless anybody has any more questions, to designate the audio recording as the official record of the meeting.
I have one. Will this be going forward or are we starting today?
Chair George, yes, this is going forward. So, and we have been doing this for the last couple meetings to really figure out the process that works versus having those pages and pages of minutes. But we would like to have this moving forward. And in future agendas, you would just see approved minutes, and you would know it's the audio recording and the minutes log that we have that accompany. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. So like starting in September, I guess.
I have
Other
a
questions?
quick question or thought on it
Go
too.
ahead, Bree.
I'm just thinking, someone here knows much more about this than I do, but about needing to be like informed that you're being recorded in the state of Montana. I'm just wondering, or if that's true, I'm wondering if we just need to make sure we're including some sort of statement anytime we have like public comment, or when new committee members are signing their agreement, that there's like a statement in there so that it's all kind of informed consent kind of thing. That's all.
I feel like it's well known. It's stated at the beginning of the meeting, but I don't know, do you have a question or comment on that? Or I feel like we do that currently at the start of the meeting. Certainly if somebody came on late to the meeting, they may not be aware of that, but I think that's common knowledge, and we do state it at the beginning of the meeting. So I don't know, Bree, Director Bragg, maybe you can think about that.
Chair, council member, thank you for the question. I do think we can make sure that's in the table setting at the beginning. When the chair provides the overview of the meeting, we can be sure that it's provided there. I want to say also online, when we start the meeting, you have to agree that the meeting is being recorded. I don't know if all members have to do that if you're attending virtually, but I think that is an option as well.
Yeah, every meeting I've attended on Zoom, it does say that at the beginning. Did it say that for you guys, Bree, today? Do you know? Do you remember?
Yep, it did. It did say that. Yep.
Yeah, so I think even if somebody came into the meeting late, before they're allowed to enter the meeting, that's one of the agreements to being let into the meeting.
Makes sense. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thank you, Bree. Any other questions for Director Bragg or Jeremy before we entertain a motion? Okay, I would entertain a motion to designate the audio recording as official record of the meeting, if anyone would care to do that.
So moved.
Okay, it's been moved. Is there a second? And then what? Second. Okay, Tina. It's been moved by Mike and seconded by Tina. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll take a vote. All those that are, what do you call it, in agreement, agreement with, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign? Motion carries unanimously. And then same thing to approve the minutes log.
I move to approve the minutes log.
Tina has moved to approve the minutes log. Is there a second?
Second, Rachel.
Rachel second. It's been moved and second to approve the minutes log. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move that to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Director Bragg, for that explanation. And I do think that'll make it a lot easier for folks. I'm looking at Kim. Okay, I think we're just gonna keep moving through, right? Through lunch?
Lunch is being delivered between 11:45 and noon.
Okay, so we're gonna move forward until we go to a break here in a second. And especially because we have a couple more action items. Jeremy, do we have time to get through this?
If we get to it right now.
Okay, so application review committee ARC report, Mike, would you care to tell us about the committee meeting?
Sure, thank you. The application review committee met on May 13th. There is a report in your packet that has been very well done. Thanks, staff, for that. That's always helpful. We had two topics on that agenda of note. One was the funding for the after-school program grant. That explanation of that grant is in your packet as well. It was a one-time only funding for the after-school program to implement the evidence-based after-school program supporting youth safety and academic engagement. The committee recommended funding 12 applicants with the highest score out of the total of 24 applicants. Each of those 12 would get $25,000 each for a total of $20,000 each. So I think I throw that back over to Jeremy if there's anything to add to that. And then to you, Chair, if for public comment and questions before we take any action on.
Jeremy, anything to add to that? You don't. Okay. Is there any public comment? Did we lose our one public person online? No.
Do you want me to go through the grant summary?
Yeah, and probably. Yeah.
Okay. So the purpose of the after-school program grant was state monies delivered to offer a fast, flexible community access pathway for distributing funds. As we know in our communities, if kids are busy, kids stay out of trouble. So the idea was to fund these programs. Like I said, $25,000 doesn't fully fund the program, but makes a huge difference. So we based this more or less on the juvenile detention grant framework. And so what it comes down to is it's a state funded, state administered, allows for after school programs for, I guess these programs can be after school, they can be summertime, they can be weekends. All right. No federal restrictions on or reporting requirements. It was a fast, flexible implementation timeline compared to doing it more along the lines of Title II. Highly accessible for both rural and tribal, and there were priority points set aside for both. It has strong alignment with what the legislative intent was for these local after-school programs. And again, like Mike said, $300,000, 12 programs, $25,000 a piece. The model supports diverse community needs by removing federal barriers and allowing for Montana communities, especially those rural and tribal, to put forward, to access resources quickly. The administration of the program, it's fully administered by the state level, so it's administered by the Board of Crime Control. Local providers maintain autonomy in their programs, simplified reporting requirements compared to the federal models, and streamlined review and approval process. It's intended to strengthen our after-school programming at a statewide level. The one thing that we do, we seem to send most of our money goes to Western Montana. The nice thing about this, it was opened out all across everywhere. And so there was a possibility for a program to pick up priority points for both tribal and rural. Okay. It supports these underserved areas, especially high needs population. And again, reduces those barriers that a lot of the smaller communities don't put in for, because there are these huge amounts of barriers that come in, and they're fighting against, a lot of times, against programs that grant writers have these different pieces. And so it really gives those opportunities for them to put in for the programs. And so, Chair, the programs that were put forward with Montana State Billings, Beaverhead Brigade, the Boys and Girls Club of Missoula County, Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Central Montana, the Sweetgrass Technical Institute, Whitehall Public Schools, the University of Montana Trio Upward Bound Program, Billings Public Schools, Reach Higher Montana, YWCA of Missoula, Eureka Public Schools, and Big Sky Youth Empowerment. So those are the programs that were recommended that came out of the ARC. And at this time, I return it back to you for a vote.
Okay, is there any public comment online? I don't think we have any there. Any public comment in here? Okay. Is any public in here? Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
As the chair of the ARC committee, and based upon the recommendation, I'll move that we fund the top 12 applicants as stated.
I'll second that.
So moved by Mike and seconded by, was that you, Judge Nicely?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mike and Jeremy, especially for all your guys' work on that, also the other people on that committee. And I think we got some great, I think doing it a little bit different like this was great. I know Beaverhead County is one that, one of the groups that was awarded one of the grants, so that'll be great. Okay, Jeremy, on to the regional.
Randy, could I make a comment that, yeah, the comment's not related to this grant cycle, but I did because the Montana After School Alliance did do outreach to try to get programs to apply for this grant because we know the need that is out there. I spoke to a lot of different programs who were very interested in applying, but a few that actually found either the amount was actually too high for a couple of the programs, and then a couple that was too low, and then a couple that found the grant application to be really cumbersome and they didn't have the staff capacity to take it on. And so I was wondering, and again, this is outside of my purview on the Youth Justice Council, but we will be working for funding again in the future. And I would also be interested in doing sort of a survey of programs who either applied or wanted to apply or thought about applying to get a better idea of how the grant worked for them to kind of inform future grant processes, either for us or other departments who are administering funds in this area. What would this group feel like be okay with us doing that, or you know, what guidance could I have on that?
Well, first, before anybody tries to answer that, I would be remiss to not draw attention to Rachel. Sorry, Rachel, I did not do that. Rachel, I think, is responsible for a lot of this money being there in the first place through the legislature and through her work and her efforts. So I'm glad you slowed me down, Rachel, because now we can thank you for that. Does anybody, so is that a question, Rachel?
Well, I guess I just wanted to make sure everybody's okay with that. I would just really like to get more context out there and then have that and be able to bring that to you guys to potentially inform future funding if we have it.
Kind of just a comment and a heads up.
Yeah, or any other thoughts on what we should ask, what we should, what you guys want to know. I could work separately to, you know, like check it with Jeremy and the team so that they're getting their questions answered as well.
Okay, Director Bragg.
Chair, council member, I think I appreciate that. I mean, I would love for us to partner on what a survey or a post survey would look like, because it's part of the conversation that the bucket list item that we'll get to eventually as an agency-wide assessment of our application process and kind of walk through that step by step. Again, just something to look at as we look at internal processes. So we may already serve some of these folks that are going to receive an award from us for this. And so it just provides a little bit more feedback on the process in general. But it also, if we could think about the questions related to, I know the council came to the 25K, but is there a different formula? If this was not a one-time only, what would that formula look like moving forward? So I think if you would be open to working with us on some of those surveys, questions, then it could tackle a few different ideas or directions.
Okay, yeah, I'd love that. And I could just set up a meeting with you, Director Beggs, and Jeremy separately, if that makes the most sense. But yeah, I'd love to do that.
So thank you, Rachel. Thank you, guys. But I think if you have any comments for Rachel, maybe reach out to her, and then she can work with Jeremy and Kayla to explore how that might look moving forward. And again, thank you, Rachel, for getting the whole ball moving on that whole thing, on all that money.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the fiscal year 2027 Regional Juvenile Detention Grant. Jeremy.
Okay, so the purpose of this, guys, of this particular grant is it gives funding to our regional juvenile detention centers. And then there's a second part to this that comes down to really basically transportation of kids to our detention centers. Within that detention center, there are also there's some monitoring that can go on out of these pieces. It helps pay for staff. Whatever these regional detention centers need, and it's all based on numbers of children in their particular district. Okay, and so this year's grant funding was $608,873. The 2026 regional juvenile detention allocation breakdown is based on populations 10 to 17 within each region. So the West region this year was $178,519.37. The Southwest region was $107,676.44. The South Central region, $136,818.78. The North Central region, $132,252.15. And then the East region was $45,606.26. I already explained the two different types of allocations. Additional eligible service types, non-secure detention, 25% match, electronic monitoring, 25% match. So the program administration period runs from July 1st of 26 to June 30th of 2027. Regions must follow the most recently approved regional plan, submitted quarterly, and then the final fiscal reports ensures that all items and expenditures comply with grant requirements. Again, the summary, $600,873 to maintain the Montana's juvenile detention system through secure detention, transportation only allocation. The grant ensures that all regions, urban, rural, and frontier, can provide safe, appropriate detention services while meeting state juvenile justice standards. So, before we get too far into this, we did have one of our regions not submit in a timely manner. Okay, and that was our West region. The ARC committee decided that they were willing to go ahead and recommend that that this go forth, even though they were late with their with the information that they needed to submit. I was told that the person was going to be here. I don't see her here. But basically it came down to she came forward. She's on. Is she on?
I am.
So I will let her speak to that herself.
Thank you. My name is Cheryl Ziegler. I'm the detention commander in Missoula. And for years, Missoula has administered the Western Region Juvenile Detention Grant for the 6 counties in our region. I wish I had a really great explanation for you for the untimely submission this year, but I don't. And all I can do is ask for, the council's consideration. And this is an error that's completely on Missoula and myself. And I don't want the other 5 counties we administer this for to suffer as a result of this error. We have, we have submitted timely and administered this grant effectively for years and years and years. And this year we just failed. So I'm happy to answer any questions about how that happened. I really don't have a great explanation, but I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have for me.
Well, this is Randy Shipman before we have any questions. And I was on that committee. We read your letter. I thought it was well written and well said. You didn't make excuses, took responsibility. And that's, I think, why we made the decision we made. And we greatly appreciate that. I also think we set some safeguards in place moving forward so that doesn't happen again, especially if it falls on one person's lap, like it sounds like it falls on yours. So thank you for your honesty and your, not making excuses about it. Are there any questions for her or Jeremy? Is there any more to add to that? Sam?
No, Mr. Chairman, I just got to add a couple things. I've worked with Commander Ziegler for 15, 20 years as a colleague across the state. She runs a great facility. Mistakes happen, and I think we could cut her a little bit of the slack here.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Sam. Any other questions or comments? And Jeremy, I'll come back to you here at the end. Any other questions or comments? Thank you for being here today too. Jeremy, go ahead.
So that's what I'm saying, Cheryl. I didn't realize you were on. I appreciate you being here because I think it shows how important this is, and that, like I said, we did vote to put in some safeguards that will help make sure that it doesn't happen, because mistakes do happen. Sometimes things slide through the cracks. It just kind of is what it is. And so, with that being said, I would suggest that you move forward with the vote and that we go forward with it as it's written. Tomorrow when we go forward, we'll also have an explanation and talk to the board about it.
Any further questions? Is she going to be on tomorrow?
I will be.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is 12 of the 24 applicants? Is she part of the 12?
No, it's different. This is
a different grant. Yeah.
So this is
Juvenile detention.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Question, I guess, is this more of is it just a pass through?
It is more of a formality. Jeremy explained that well to our committee. Go ahead, Jeremy.
So essentially, this is allocated by the state. We don't have any say as to how much it's going to be or how it's broke down. And so essentially, they request the money and they get it.
So it's not a true heart grant.
No, the only thing is like it says, we go through is basically it comes back as a receipt thing, and we just have to track that and make sure that it matches up at the end of the year. To go along with that, however, we do our monitoring that we do for compliance. It does go in to hit these facilities.
Chair, if I may, George. So it does follow this grant, even though the statutory amount, the formula is set in Montana Code annotated. So it says by law, MVCC is going to look at how many youth are in this particular geographic area. And so our fiscal staff, they pull that formula that's in code, and we come out with these numbers that you see in your packet. And then by statute, they are required, any region that is developed or created, they are required to submit an application to MPCC. And that application process, although a little bit different, it's not as, I think, intense as like maybe Victims of Crime Act or things like that. It still generally follows our same process. So we put it on our website. We have an open date. We have an offers call that Jeremy does. You do that. You post one for RHD. And then we have a close date. So it generally, we try to keep the process like all of our other grants. And we just don't have as much flexibility in the formula setting or how much money they get because that's set by code.
Thank you, Director. Sam, I appreciate your comments as a colleague. And again, she had written a letter and I think that, mistakes happen and we're going to move forward. So if there are no other comments or questions, then I would entertain a motion to accept the fiscal year 2027 Regional Juvenile Detention Grant as presented.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Mike. It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Tina seconded, I think, Pete Chabri, sorry. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? If not, we'll take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right, now that we've gotten through the action items, and it looks like we're at about lunchtime. Is that in, Kim, by chance?
Yeah, he just got here.
Okay, so Director Bragg, we will take a break, right? And so, how long, Jeremy, do we want to break for? So the people online can get back.
It looks like 30 minutes, and I think that's probably fine.
You think do we need that much?
Okay.
People here, what do you want?
To you guys.
20 or 30 minutes? 20. I'd say 22 because we still have a lot of round table to get through. Let's, it is 12:00. Wow, that clock is off. It's 12:02 according to my phone. It's 12:02. Let's break to 12. Let's go 12:25. We will come back. So those of you online, if you want to take a break and log back in at 12:25, we will resume the meeting. So the meetings resume or closed at 12:03. Thank you. Okay, so we'll officially open at 12:26 with that announcement. Hopefully our folks are back online with us. I see Bree. Marissa. Mike and Judge Nicely and who else was on Wednesday? Is Christy gone for the day, Kim? Is that right?
He'll be back.
Okay. Rachel. Yeah. Okay, we left off, or we're going to go back to the roundtable. We have a few folks that haven't been able to chime in. Unfortunately, we lost Christy. Is Rachel back online?
Rachel, I believe it now.
We lost Rachel. Okay. Judge Nicely. Don't see her, but I do see Mike. Mike, would you care to tell us what's going on in your world? Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Sure. Mike Shavers. I work with Yellowstone Boys and Girls Ranch. We've got a lot of stuff going on. We are currently running at capacity and all of our programs really. Struggling with staff as usual, trying to get enough people to serve the kids that need help out there. As of today, we have 2,058 kids in service across the state. 88 of those are in our psychiatric residential and 46 in therapeutic group homes across the state. In our the rest are in community-based services. We've got 82 kids awaiting services today in CBS. In our residential programs, PRTF and group home combined, we're still averaging about 150 referrals a month. In April, last full month I have data on, we were able to serve 27 of those new kids, new referrals. So we're still working on our project with Gallatin County to create a campus in that area. We did that's a partnership with local community providers, Gallatin County and others. We had a short film that was created on that project, a 17-minute documentary that we premiered last week on the campus. I'll throw that in the chat if anybody likes to watch it. It talks about the process and the partnership and its tie into prevention of youth suicide. So it's incredibly well done. And it's a tearjerker, so be careful if you watch it. We did get notified earlier this week that the department has determined to eliminate the planned 3% rate increase for Medicaid services, other than those that are legislatively required. That's a couple $1 million hit to our budget for this next year. Certainly makes it pretty challenging to maintain staff and services, because as all you guys know, our costs haven't maintained stable over this last year. We also got a cut of a larger percentage from the Office of Public Instruction for our educational services. So that was significantly reduced this year back to the levels of 3 years ago, I think. So we're going to have to respond to that and make some other adjustments. We're working on that now. Our goal will be to reduce costs in non-kid serving areas as much as possible. But 80% of our budget is staff. The other 20% is primarily fixed cost. The cost is the same whether we have, 2 kids in a program or 20 kids in a program. So it is going to come down to staffing, and it's going to have an impact out there on the number of kids we serve. It's fascinating. We did get a couple of grants on expanding targeted case management services and expanding PRTF beds prior to the announcement of this elimination of the rate increase. So they're in direct opposition to each other. There's no way we'll be able to meet the goals, or very little chance we'll be able to meet the goals of those grants because of the subsequent reductions. So we're in better shape than most. We certainly have some reserves and endowment, so we're going to use that. But I think we're in store for some challenging years, because the FMAP will decrease again in 2027 based upon the one big beautiful bill. And so Montana will either be in this, the legislature will have the decision to either increase general revenue fund contributions to Medicaid services, or we'll see additional cuts. So working with the Behavioral Health Alliance on a strategy to manage that. I think right now what we're thinking about is trying to work with a proposal to reallocate the marijuana tax funds that has created significant revenues for the states, most of which goes to fish, wildlife, and parks. The amount that goes to mental health services is limited to $6 million. It's just a silly way to spend that money, if you ask me. And ask that more of that money be directed towards substance abuse and mental health services, which is impacted by the marijuana usage. The other strategy is that Montana has seen a decrease in tobacco tax revenues as usage has switched to vapes, and Montana does not tax vapes and vaping. So proposal will be to place a tax on vapes and be able to direct those dollars towards mental health services and substance abuse services. So beginning that with working with legislators and the Behavioral Health Alliance to see if we can get some of that legislation proposed. Of course, that won't help until earliest July 1 of 2027. So got a long year till we get there. So it's kind of exciting. I'm a ray of sunshine. So
thank you, Mike. One quick note before we get to Misty, our last one. So Misty, you kind of now have an idea of what to do. I want to go back to Marissa and mine real quick. Marissa gave me credit, but I have a lot of really good people in my school that help. Simone Nichols and my teachers that help with the program she's talking about. So I acted like I took credit. I probably should. But again, thank you. All right, Misty. So tell us about, introduce yourself. Tell us who you are, what you do, and then kind of what's going on in your world.
Yeah. My name is Misty Lemire. I run the Victim Assistance Program, the Empowering Interstate Victim Assistance Program in Fort Belknap. We collaborate with local resources in our community. We do federal, state, and tribal cases. We do a lot of outreach in our community. Direct services is primarily what we do on a day-to-day basis with community members. We work very closely with law enforcement in our community just to serve all cases. I also serve as the Head Start Policy Council community representative. I am a site coordinator for the Boys and Girls Club after school program in our community. That's about, that's not just all I do, but that's it in a nutshell.
Sounds like they're lucky to have you.
Thank
You do a
you.
lot. Which is usually what happens with groups like this, right? Involved in everything. Well, thank you, Misty, and welcome to this council. And I think that you'll be a great asset to us, and hopefully we are to you as well. Okay, I think we got everybody for the roundtable, so we'll pick back up. We will be on page 3 of your agenda under the Do the Right Thing program and celebration update. We're almost on time. So Jeremy, you want to talk about Do the Right Thing this year and celebration?
Absolutely. So the Do the Right Thing program is a program for 6th through 8th graders, and they write essays about it comes under 3 things. What is violence? How has violence affected them? And then the last leg of it is what can we do to make changes? And so we had 274 individuals that took part in the program, and we had 80 submissions. Actually, it was 84 submissions that came in. And the first round, we had members of the YJC actually score each application, and then from there it came internally. We took 20, and we had some of our fellow workers here at MBCC. One of them was Tammy, sitting right next to me, and they went through that final 20, and we narrowed it down to 10. And then from that 10, then it went to Randy, myself, and Kayla. And what I did then was took the averages of each one of the applicants between the 3 scores, and we came out with an individual, and that individual was Aurora Radmer. And actually, right after our spot where we were just at, if you keep flipping, you have Do the Right Thing, and her essay is actually the second page after. And so if you are interested in reading her essay, it was very good. And the one thing about these essays is that they can tug at your heartstrings. Some of the stuff that comes through is uncomfortable. And but it's that opportunity for these kiddos to kind of tell their story. And with that, Aurora Admiral, like I said, she's from Butte East Middle School. Her and her guardian, who's her sister, are going to go to DC from the 7th through the 15th and be part of that celebration. And it's a really neat thing. The first night they get to go and they have dinner at the Kuwait ambassador's house. And then they get to go to the Smithsonian, they go to the Supreme Court. They get to meet with our representatives. Well, they get to meet with staffers generally, with the representatives. Tina and I found that while we were in DC this week. But our student finalists were Mackenzie Lee, Nora Lucian, Riley Sheehy, Maria Flores, excuse me, Everett Anderson, Kenneth Kingston, Lillian Carden, Lexi Clausen, Ava Rostad, and Emma Colloy. Okay. And if you look as you go through the people that actually scored for us from the board were Randy, Mike, Sam, Marissa, Tina, Misty, Bree, and Judge Nisley and Rachel. Okay. And then the internal staff was Tammy Fowler, who's again sitting next to me, Sheila Erb, Rose Harmon, and Janice Fries. And then our teachers that took part this year were Mary Eldridge from Dillon, Katie Miller from Dillon, Mary Brown from Butte East, Jamie Fabatz from Butte East, Shelby Giles from Fairfield, and Heather Yett from Hillcrest. And so that basically is the rundown of the program. Again, the sponsor of this is the Kuwait American Foundation, and they cover everything but the airfare. So once they get there, they cover the hotels, they cover all of the sightseeing. But the neatest thing that comes out of it, on the last day, they pick people to read parts of their essay. And it's interesting when you're talking about rural Montana and you listen to people from Chicago, kids from Chicago, DC, those different places. But the common denominator is they all really understand that something's wrong and something needs to be done. And it's that opportunity for youth to have a voice. So that's my presentation on Do the Right Thing.
Any questions for Jeremy? Director Brent?
Thank you, Chair. Jeremy, do you want to share about the ceremony, the change?
Okay, so this year, normally we try to fit it in, and the dates that we went through where potential people were available didn't really work out. And the date that we finally chose, which made perfect sense to those of us that pay no attention to the calendar, it happened to be over a holiday weekend. And so the change, we're going to actually move it to the Board of Crime Control's conference at what's that?
Fairmont.
In October at Fairmont. I'm having a tough time here. I wasn't expecting to talk about this, so my mind is not working. I apologize. But the neat thing about that is it's going to be the opportunity for this to be a much bigger platform for the kiddos to talk. There's potential for one of our former members to come in who wants to stay involved. That she actually was an ambassador, Sophia Doe. She went last year, and she actually applied to go to Washington again. She didn't get chosen this time, but the thing about it is that she came to me early on and said, "Hey, I went to a new school, and I really think that they should be involved in this." And so, that's what we need is we need that voice to be out there. And like I said, what an amazing opportunity, because most of the time when we take these kids to DC, a lot of them have never left the state. Some of them have left their county for that matter, let alone get on an airplane and fly to DC and then come in contact with kids from all over the country, be in contact with the people in Washington. Hopefully, like I said, they get to talk to our congressmen and our senators. But they'll get time one way or the other to talk to the staffers. And the last time I went, one of the kiddos had an awful lot to say. And it was very, I think, pretty powerful to have them have to sit and listen to a kid go, hey, we got a problem and you need to do something about this. And so, like I said, guys, thank you for being part of this because it is a wonderful program.
Well, May is a tough time, so I'm looking forward to the change. Do we know the date, October?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. October 21st. And the conference is the 20th and 21st, but the Do the Right Thing celebration ceremony will be the award luncheon for the 21st. And yeah, we're gonna chat with Sophia, the last year's essay winner, and we're gonna think through our ceremony, what that looks like, and we'd love to include council members.
We would love for you to come.
Yeah.
I mean, not just to the celebration, we'd love to see you for the whole thing. Because there's different tracks, there's a lot of good information out there. It's that opportunity to talk to law enforcement. It's an opportunity to kind of touch people that you probably don't touch on a regular basis. And it's an opportunity to talk about school safety. It's an opportunity to talk about what's going on in your schools. It's an opportunity to talk about the regional juvenile detention centers. It is probably as good a platform as we can give you as MBCC. And like I said, we would love for you to come.
Well, one thing for me being closer, and I hope the MBCC considers this. A lot of the participants are out of Dillon and Butte, and there are other areas, and we're trying to grow those areas, Misty. So you can grow those up there. We're trying to get more kids involved, but I think it'd be great. And I don't know how this works. I don't know if you can sponsor the lunch or what, but I would bring my teachers to that luncheon for them to be a part of that, to see whether their kid wins or not. But you have a lot of teachers in Butte. I mean, you can look at the list there. It's basically Butte and Dillon. It'd be great right there in Fairmont to maybe let those teachers go and be a part of it in some way, at least to see their kids up there speaking and stuff like that. That would be cool. I know the teachers generally come here when we've done it here in May, but not always. And not for the non-winners a lot, so it'd be kind of cool to see, like in my case, Mary Eldridge and Katie Miller, whether their kids are on this list or not as finalists, for them to go and feel like it's going to give them more buy-in to the program. I don't know if that's something.
I believe that they have kids on that list. Actually.
Well, yeah. So I don't know if that's something you can do or not.
Chair, yeah, and so in the registration process, we are, Hannah and other folks are working on trying to figure out how you can register for the conference, and then also if you want to register just to come to the Do the Right Thing ceremony. So we're working through what that looks like. That way, there's options available. But this also, the move from the May celebration for folks that may not know, is that historically we've had a May celebration here. It's very small with YJC members that can make it, and then teachers and students that are the top 10. But having this platform, I think, gives Jeremy an opportunity to maybe present on the Do the Right Thing program, have the kids involved, share about their DC experience, because the chair you mentioned that it's post DC trip, so maybe they can share their experience there. But really just to open the conversation up a little bit more. That way more people know about it and ask questions if they want to try to incorporate it in their stuff.
Could we do a press release and send it out to news stations and to the one newspaper that just so I think that way it gets out a little bit more, especially if we're doing a bigger celebration. I think absolutely there are more schools out there that would participate if they knew about it. So
Chair, council member, a press release for specifically the Do the Right Thing ceremony.
I think it's a big deal to get a trip to go to Washington, DC, and I think more kids will participate if they if they knew what the ultimate prize was.
It is a huge deal. As one who's had a couple kids that have gone, it is a huge deal for those kids and for their teacher and families. This body has made a concerted effort to get the word out there for whatever reason, you know, like everything else. But certainly making a bigger deal out of it there with whatever newspapers and stuff. Because I know like it's in the newsletter from NBCC and I think it's been in the Independent Record and stuff like that, but yeah, making a, you know, trying to, I mean, that's always, I think, a goal is trying to market it and trying to get people involved, because right now we do have a few cities involved, but it'd be nice to grow that more. And it is a great opportunity for kids. A couple of kids have gone, I know in the past, like have never been, if some of them had never been on an airplane, you know, certainly many of them. I know there's one individual said something here one time that they had never been out of the state of Montana. So, I mean, it is a really cool opportunity for some. So, any other comments or questions about Do the Right Thing? For Jeremy, or any ideas? And if you have ideas, maybe reach out to Director Bragg or to Jeremy in terms of next year's conference on October 20th, 21st, but certainly the luncheon on the 21st. I think it'd be great for like me to be able to bring those couple teachers down for Butte, hopefully to send their teachers. And you do have to have buy-in from administration. And that's been one of the things, Tina, that, and maybe as a trustee in the Missoula district, you know, you have some voice there, but it has been tough, and you really need support of administration, I think, to sort of push that. A lot of English teachers and some social studies will do it because it sort of fits in their curriculum, but I know for us, it's helped for me to kind of push that.
Chair, if I have one comment, other states have this one pager where they get the superintendent to say, yes, like this is okay for you. It's essentially like a sign off to say, please do this if you want to. I don't know if we've been at those tables before. So if there are council members, and we can certainly talk to the board as well, that have a seat at the table, we would love to either present, Jeremy could present, we could share about Do the Right Thing, and then also provide that form. And if the superintendent or whoever that is in the school world would sign off on it, they could provide that to their schools to say, it's okay to participate if you want to.
I can make those introductions to those organizations that can spread the word much easier. So yeah, because we're definitely involved in those, like School Administrators of Montana, Montana Small School Association would be another one that I would say those organizations send out information to their members. And most of the time, well, it's all administrators. So getting that word out for next year.
Yeah, I would concur with Tina. There's definitely organizations that she or I could introduce Jeremy to. I think the School Administrators Stand Conference here, generally here in Helena, would be a great place for you to go. Rob Watson, excuse me, would be the contact to get on the agenda and actually do a quick little spiel about it. The other thing is, in the past, this organization gave, I think it was $500 or something like that to a couple of teachers. I can't remember what the criteria was for that, but if there was any money tied to that, to those classrooms to get materials, like my teacher got some novels and stuff along those lines, that is always an immediate buy-in, as we all know. So I don't know that there is, maybe it's only a couple $100, but maybe for those schools that would participate, they actually get a little something so that it incentivizes that English teacher or social studies teacher to do it, and the superintendent or clerk or whoever, you know, when money's involved, that kind of gets more buy-in. That's why we're so bought in, is we were able to give them money, and now I can keep holding that over them. You got money to do this. But Tina definitely, or Jeremy, could get you in touch with some of those people. Lance Mountain out of Helena here, Montana School Board Association, Small Schools Alliance, Janelle Beers, Rob Watts. Rob Watson with Sam, and there's a couple other organizations, but Rob's would be the best one to go to the administrative conference, SAM conference, and present there, if that's a possibility. Even if you got information to him that he could present.
There's no reason why we couldn't go and do that presentation. It would be really helpful. Yeah, you got me that information, but it would be probably even doubly more helpful if you made that introduction.
Yeah, that's what we would, yeah, for sure.
And get that opportunity to go and talk with him and then the opportunity to go to present.
I'll work on Rob if you will do those others.
Yeah.
I'll get it camera up right now. Any other questions or comments for Jeremy on Do the Right Thing? Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Moving on to financial report. Looks like she was here and then she left. And Tammy's doing it?
Yes.
Okay. So Tammy will be right back, or there she is. Tammy, financial report. You're right on time.
Sorry, I damaged my throat last week, and so I have kind of a froggy voice and I cough, so pardon me for that. My staff member, Kelly Downer, was ready to present to you. She was so excited. And then her little boy got strep throat and bad, and so she had to stay home with him today. So I am the minor substitute because she had a ready to go. So I'm not as good as her, but I will go through it. Basically, what you have in your packet is a representative of the 3 grants we currently have. Everything is the same as you saw last March. We are going through, we're at the end of the current grant period for the 25J awards. They ended on 3/31/2026. We did have one applicant that got an extension to the end of April. And so we paid out almost everything. You have the amount they're saying, excuse me, 382,000. We've paid up to 414,000. There's a few more that we're still working with that are having difficulty getting their documents in, understanding how to close a grant. But we will have that done shortly. And then at the bottom here, you have voted to award the $300,000. So we will get busy on that as soon as the larger board approves it too. And so we're in good shape. Jeremy is also working on the 2025 Title II project. Any questions?
Yeah, is there any questions? Are there any questions online for Tammy? All right, well, we let you off easy. You don't have to talk much.
Yeah, thank you.
I hope you feel better. Thank you, Tammy, for that. Do that, Tom. We're almost on time.
I heard that.
So Tom Beltine, who is the youth court director from the court administrator's office, is here with us today. Jeremy, do you want any other introductions for Tom, or?
I can just kind of briefly give you an idea of what we're kind of looking at. We had invite Tom to come in and talk a little about one of our priority areas, and that's the time served for youth in that trial detention. And the other piece is that Tom was heavily involved with the assessment center piece when this was talked about before, and so he can actually give us a little bit of history as to what has happened there as well. So a couple things that obviously are in our priority areas, and it's great to have somebody come in that can really give us some information so that we are better informed when we're looking at the decisions that we want to make in the priority areas going forward.
All right, with that, Tom, tell us
everything.
Tell us everything.
40 minutes.
I don't know if you want to introduce yourself for.
Yeah, I mean, real quickly, I can do that. Again, my name is Tom Milteen. I serve as the Bureau Chief for Youth Court Services with the Office of Court Administrator. So backstory to folks that aren't as in tune, Youth Court Services, Juvenile Justice, sits within the judicial branch in the state of Montana. Depending on what state you're in, that looks a little bit different, whether it's executive branch or some form of that, but the history with our state is it's been within the judicial branch. That's not even recently anymore. 2002, state assumption occurred. Prior to that, youth court probations were essentially tied to counties. And so just to give a little context with regards to that, currently we have 22 judicial districts in the state of Montana. Each one of those districts has a youth court services probation agency department attached to that. And again, I manage administrative capacity of those as those agencies are connected to the court administrator's office. From a local perspective, youth court judges are the primary overseer of those agencies, those departments, but the court administrator's office is tasked with providing those administrative duties, financial, IT, other kind of support. So some people will tell you that they work for that judge. Some people will tell you they work for that person. Nobody will tell you they work for Tom Milteen, which is just fine with me. So, like Jeremy indicated, he had given me about 4 or 5 talking points. I'm really good at going down rabbit holes. I'm not so good at getting out of them. And so I'm going to do my best to kind of maintain those talking points. But at the same time, I'll be honest with you, my brain's going 600 miles an hour since being, just a fly on the wall here today. And so I really grateful and appreciate that opportunity because candidly, I've been in my position now for about 9 years and I don't recall having been to a youth justice council to present maybe once or twice prior. So I'm hoping this is an opportunity to be a resource, to be sort of that conduit between what's happening in the field. I'm 2 blocks, I have to remind myself, 2 blocks south of here. So being able to come down in person was a huge perk too. I think if I could, again, to stay on task, I kind of created a little bit of a process here. I wanted to give you some context of really what's been occurring in the last 4 or 5 years within youth court services, and then kind of build into some of those talking points. So in 2022, the Council for State Governments was introduced to us. The Court Administrator's Office did an overview study. They're telling me I'm too loud. That's funny. My mom just told me I'm the too loud person. So, where they came in and did an assessment of our youth court system, did a year-long dive into youth court services in the state, listening sessions across the state, and from that, we've been working on some implementation plans, action plans that corresponded with those findings and those recommendations. And so I wanted to provide sort of that context because I think it plays into a lot of what's going on currently in juvenile justice within the state of Montana, and not that we were not working hard and diligently before that, but it's really, in my perspective, put us in a really positive and progressive position to be looking at some system reforms and improvements across youth court juvenile justice. And so currently, like I said, we're and you guys all know how grants work. We're in like a 3rd iteration of a 4th cycle of a piece of paper that has been able to continue to have CSG be our agency partner with regards to this. Some of the bigger issues bigger items that have come out of that study was we've really taken efforts to improve our training program, our judicial academy within youth court services, improve some policies around what you heard this morning, assessments. We have our own assessment protocol within youth court services, partnering with our agency partners across the state, be it Children's Mental Health Bureau, be it Department of Corrections, be it Department of Public and Health and Human Services, be it education. So Again, wanted to kind of lay that foundation of what we as a system, as an agency have been working on the last 5 years or so. With respect to, so, because I'm a good bureaucrat, I dug into this a little bit, and I'm going to provide probably more questions than answers when it comes to this time served issue. So, because understanding that youth court in and of itself is a civil court in Montana, a lot of what you refer to as time served entities with regards to statute and that relative to adult court functions doesn't really play into youth court functions. And so I think this is a great opportunity to have discussions around this. Do I have answers? Absolutely not. But in talking briefly with Jeremy around this being a priority, I can definitely see how it overlaps and plays into those cases that have youth court initial ties that move into extended jurisdictions with adult courts, either as a direct file as a youth is criminally convicted, that they definitely, we should have safeguards to ensure that anything that they had in place as part of that process, moving from the youth court to the adult court is safeguarded. You know, that's the word I'm going to use, because if we're going to be treating them like adults, then they should have those protections, those opportunities to, and there's a statute that allows for that. But I think again, the mechanisms of moving from a youth court structure supervision to an adult court structure, there's probably definitely some areas, potentially some legislative opportunities that might come in session to make sure that we're actually applying those standards when a youth court case moves into an adult system. So with respect to youth court and time served, I mean, honestly, again, we function as a civil court. You're not you're not found guilty, you're adjudicated a delinquent. Most of our sentences are determined as dispositions, with the effort being on rehabilitation, trauma-informed mental health services and those type of things. And so our worldview is that we're taking the time to provide those supports, not taking away opportunities to use that, which a kid's not going to tell you that, well, thank you for giving me more time. But 90% of what we do doesn't even hit the quotes through our informal system. And so when you take that other 10%, that are in a formal court or in a formal capacity where a judge has ordered their disposition, their sentence, oftentimes that might be for a year, might be for 2 years, it might be till they're age 18. And so I think that's where applying a time served sort of structure, just it's square peg, round hole kind of thing. So, so Jeremy, that's kind of my kind of piece on that. I think, and me getting a better understanding of how this is a priority for you as a council, if it's in that focus and in that vein of youth that are transferred to the adult system or in some adult supervisory capacity, how we can make sure that, again, back to safeguards, that those things are being safeguarded in their sentences or in their supervision. And then, if it's within that youth court side, that civil side, then having a conversation around what does that really look like? If a youth is in a detention center for 3 months and then, their disposition is that they're on supervision for a year, is it makes sense to take 3 months of that off if the intent and the goal is to be providing structure in that rehabilitation? So I think, again, sort of splitting those two pieces out would probably be where I would appreciate more of a conversation around this. That are we talking about this world or that world? I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, or if folks have questions or thought around there. I'm going to pause because, again, I'm a Butte Irish Catholic bartender. Talking's not a problem for me. So.
Questions for Tom?
Hi, Tom. Are you under you say court administrators, are you like in the county, or are you part of
state court? Yeah. So yeah, we're under the judicial branch under the Supreme Court.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to picture where you sit.
Yeah. I affectionately call it the Crystal Palace.
I have a question about what you're seeing, Tom, but I don't know if you're gonna touch on that here in a minute.
Yeah, like I said, I wanted to get that stuff out there first, because that was one of the things that Jeremy had indicated that he wanted to kind of have at least an initial conversation about. And like I said, my review of that is that there's structure within statute that applies to those adult pieces. Again, when you talk about that civil side, those youth court matters where kids are in adjudication mode, time served doesn't really, you will see some, maybe some one-offs in a youth court judgment, or a judge might have said, yeah, I'm gonna give you credit for languishing in a detention center for 6 months. And now, we're gonna put you on probation till you're 18. So I might give you a carrot, but there's also opportunities throughout our process where status hearings can be held and youth can petition to be taken and removed from their supervision throughout that system. So, I think quickly too, kind of back to that study that we were involved in. One of the things Jeremy had asked me to kind of touch on quickly was some implications for statutory or legislative changes coming up this next session. Last session, a House bill resolution was passed to do an actual Youth Court Act study, HJ 23. We're being recorded, right? So I gotta be cool about this. So, I don't know that I have to be. A lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of effort went into presenting to the interim committee there. I think my understanding is that there's probably not a lot of substantive stuff that's going to come out of that interim studies review of that. But I think what it did is provided some really good opportunity, laid some foundations with a dozen or more legislators that didn't necessarily have an insight into juvenile justice in Montana or youth court, or respectfully hear these stories but not these stories, and understanding that we want to not mitigate and minimize those tough stories and those tough situations. But again, we average 4,000 youth that come through these offices a year, and 10% of them ended up in the formal process. 1% of that 10% ends up in the Department of Corrections facility. So not that those aren't issues in cases that we want to be addressing, but more of what we do, I think, lines in with what Carrie, is that right in this morning? Mentioned, diversion, prevention, early intervention. So, but again, do I sound a little disappointed in the Youth Court Act study? A little bit, because I think we were looking for some opportunities, some potentials to come out of there. But again, at the same time, I respect legislators greatly, and I think they understand the capacity that they have. What I could potentially see coming out of this is maybe another study, not for the sake of studying, but because I think the Youth Court Act in and of itself is 1971. I mean, that's old, but not old. And it's gone through iterations as trends have shifted, restorative justice, get tough models, and that kind of stuff. So you look at the Youth Court Act itself, it's pockets of all of those things that have happened across the last 40, 50 years. Having a really holistic way to kind of go in there and make some adjustments to that, I think, is still worthwhile. And if it doesn't happen this time, then maybe next time around. So the other thing that Jeremy had asked me to touch on real quickly was our report card, our annual report. So we do put out an annual report of juvenile statistics that are pulled from our JCAT system. That's our case management system. We've been doing that, since 2007. So we go on our website, there's a mountain of that information. We've been able to develop some trends with regards to juvenile justice impacts throughout that time. And so, I'm not going to get into a ton of that stuff right there, but, opportunities to answer some questions around that. And I got lots of thoughts about assessment centers and the opportunities and the things that kind of fall into that. So very much able, willing, and interested to be a resource with that. Because the fact is we've had the opportunity for assessment centers within the state of Montana since 1997. There's statutory structure in in the Youth Court Act in Montana Code annotated all around assessment centers. I think what has happened, like in most cases, you get the structure, maybe the funding will come after. And so, you know, when it was developed at that point, again, we were county entities, Youth Court Services was county entities. So I think they were looking at a way to be more consistent, to provide resources to counties. Fast forward now, I think what has happened, or what I've seen happen with regards to assessment centers, is by and large, youth referred to Youth Court Services are going through an assessment center in some capacity. They're providing, you know, assessments at the front end of that. We're, you know, determining what resources are needed to address the issues that brought that individual into youth court. You know, I think we've created hybrids of assessment centers across the state in shelter cares. You know, there's not a kid that doesn't go through your shelter care that's not getting assessed in some capacity, either by your staff or outside entities. You know, Discovery House in Anaconda, when I was a probation officer, that's what we utilized for, you know, aside from maybe a timeout for youth and their parents, it was to, you know, have a full understanding of what's actually going on with the issues. So, again, putting that out there, that if we have, or as we have continued discussions around assessment centers, I think we have a lot of structure. I think we have a lot of examples of how counties, districts, entities have sort of built what they can create as the best model around having an ability to assess youth, not just through our system, but obviously through the department's Child Family Services system as well. I think where the conversation needs to have is that what's, and I put some cool words together for this, what the infrastructure, you know, is that we're looking for. You know, is kind of to Tina's point, is it, you know, that reloading that, you know, we want stuff that doesn't have to pass through youth court to get assessments. We want things that doesn't have to land in Child Family Services division to get assessment. You know, is that building, you know, I'm looking at Mike up there, is that building more capacity around, you know, the case management programs that are out there to be able to provide that? Absolutely. But when you hear what's happening in those contexts, it's sort of like, okay, we're back to where's those other resources and those other funnels to get to those opportunities. Thanks. Wow, I can talk, can't I? I can go. So I'm going to pause there. I said, 20 minutes with that stuff. That's kind of my spiel right now. Questions, thoughts? Are you like, dude, you can talk, but can't say a word here.
So what are you seeing, Tom, with our kids? What kind of offenses or status offenses or whatever?
You know, if you look at, if you look at those report cards, I mean, we all have the post-COVID scares and that kind of stuff. You and I alluded to that a little bit. There was definitely a spike. You've seen it in your detention centers, and you're still dealing with the after effects of that. I mean, there was definitely a spike in primarily male violent offenses post-COVID. I think we have documentation, research around sort of what created that. Maybe we don't know, but that there was those issues. I think they're seeing a leveling off of that, but not the aftermath of that, because again, when you look at what's in our detention centers, there's some pretty serious high level offenses that were created. I think the last 3 years in this role, I don't know that I've recalled previously that level of youth that were being transferred automatically to the adult courts that I had probably since dating myself since the mid-90s, you know. And so I think, you know, we're still dealing with the aftermaths of that. But by and large, like I said, 90% of what we deal with are youth that are, I mean, I hate to say bumps and bruises, but are going through challenges. And we still deal with a lot of youth with mental health issues. That's sort of what the identifier is, you know, be it in school where they're acting out in school, and there's like, okay, this is raising to that level of safety or not safety. I don't know that I would say we're seeing a whole lot of difference in what we have seen historically, other than I think those pockets of what, you know, was sort of a post-COVID result in some of those high levels. And I think we've done our best to respond to that and not overreact to it. And I think that's the big challenge is that, there's that balance between, okay, do we want 12-year-olds serving 15, 20-year sentences? Or do we want to try to manage some of that with the ability to have those options later? And I think we, as a state, we react similarly when things happen, but I think we've done a good job of like, okay, let's not just overreact to some of these things right now. But yeah, again, by and large, and you can see from our report card, the majority of the referrals to our offices are low-level misdemeanor offenses, or we're I shouldn't say one of the few states, but one of a select number of states that youth court services deals with status offenses, runaways, curfews. There's some debate whether we're the right place for that or not. But again, I think the structure of our system with having a front end informal system where you can go through a youth court service office, work with a youth court probation officer, have that stuff addressed and not end up in front of a judge in a due process matter. Not that you shouldn't have that opportunity and ability, right? Youth are entitled to the same rights, but by and large, when it comes to that as an adult. So we have that mechanism there. But, at the same time, if we can try to address something within 3 months, 6 months, a year, that you're going to maybe be sitting waiting 3 months, 6 months, a year to even get in front of a judge. And I think we're in a good position to do that still. But to your question, I got 29 years in this, and I have kids I remember seeing in 97, and what I work through right now aren't a whole lot different. The expectations, the pressures might be a little bit different than what's coming for them, but we build them the same way, we make them the same way. How we respond to them, I think we're trying to be consistent around that.
Any other questions for Tom?
There's one online.
Go ahead. Can you read that?
Yes, can a report card and study be shared with the public?
They're on our website. Yeah. And I can push those out, but Montana, the court administrator's website, there's a youth court section that has all of our reports, has all of our evaluations that we've conducted over the last 10, 15 years, some other resources and whatnot. So yeah, they're all
youth court. Put the year that you want and youth court data. It'll pop right up. But I have questions. In terms of offenses as we go through, we know that we're running into a pretty significant issue with the cartels and the gangs.
Right.
And it is greatly affecting certain areas.
Right.
Do you have any insight into what can be done about that?
I think insight being understanding, awareness, and education and preparation is probably the big part of that. And to that, I think we've responded accordingly. The last year in particular, having a heavy focus on getting our staff trained on identification of gang stuff, getting a better coordination between our districts of sharing information around that population. I've had in the last year, we've had several staff that have attended some trainings and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where we're working on, is building. And again, this is sort of full circle. I remember going through this stuff mid-late 90s when this stuff was, it reared itself in Montana. And it's always, the gangs follow the drugs follow the gangs. And so I think that's where we've put our efforts is 6-7 years ago, our focus was on mental health kids, because that's what we were dealing with. If you talk to Pine Hills, that's what they were like. Every kid in here has a mental health diagnosis. Switching now, it's like every kid in here is a gangbanger. And so, getting our folks trained and resourced in that, having some better coordination with Pine Hills on, okay, maybe this doesn't need to be a revolving door because, to your point, kids are coming out on discharge and going back in within 2-3 months. So I think, from our perspective, it's improving that awareness, creating some education around this on how to best address this, identify it early, and sort of tamp it out where it's starting to ruminate, right? Use it before it gets too much. And we're also looking into some potentials about, there's some best practices that are going around in different areas of the country around emerging adult courts, to where we're doing a better job of bridging youth court cases into adult court cases, because we kind of have this sort of pocket approach right now, bandage approach on how we do these. So looking at potentially piloting some of those in some areas, have conversations around that.
Thank you. Next question that I have, in terms of, and I don't know if it falls under your purvey, but we really run into a struggle because even though at the federal level we don't talk DEI, but under Title II, the racial equity and diversity piece is, they didn't take it out. It's still there.
Right.
And one of the things that we really struggle with is that data coming out that kind of tells us what we're talking about, our youth Black population, Native, the Asian population, which really gets grouped in, they just throw them all into one block.
Right.
And we have a really tough time putting those numbers together. So my question kind of is there some way on intakes that go through that data could be collected more consistently?
In our system, I'd say yes. We haven't differentiated or changed our approach to that. We still ask those questions because it's important. We have a disproportionate minority population in our system. We can say what it is or call it what it is, but that's the truth. And so we haven't shied away from collecting that information yet.
Okay.
That's a good segue into, we're also currently working with University of Montana on a research evaluation of our detention centers. So
that would be wonderful.
Yeah, and plan to have that November, December, I think is our goal to have that completed, and I'll get that pushed out to everybody. Basically, kind of how we framed it was to it so I don't mess it up. The study seeks to answer 3 fundamental questions. Why are youth placed in detention? What factors influence length of stay? And what barriers prevent youth from being released? And so, to your point, those are going to be questions that we're asking.
Very great. And then my last question, just because I ran across this, I was doing a visit over in Missoula. What is the bottom age? Because when I was there, they had a 9-year-old who had stabbed his grandmother to death, I believe. And so, I mean, none of us would think that a 9-year-old was even capable of that. Well, obviously, that it is. How low down do you guys deal with those situations?
So, good question.
Because they didn't accept that kid.
Right. So so to differentiate here too, there's no minimum age in youth Montana codes annotated. There's an arms policy within the detention centers. I believe that it's less under 10.
We accept them in 10 till their 18th birthday.
Yeah. So, but with regards to a minimum age for referral to youth court, there is not one. We're one of the, we're not one of the few states, but probably one of the select states that doesn't have a minimum age referral to youth.
So what do you do with a situation like that?
Your best.
I mean, just where do they end up?
I think, it's again, back to that resource brokering. The goal primarily, our focus is sort of treat them and street them initially. So, if a youth was referred to our office like that, it's all hands on deck to find out what resources are in play currently, what opportunities are there to, to connect with resources and services. We have the fortune in our state to have general fund money that's allocated to each district to develop their own prevention programs to resource community-based services. And so that, in those cases, that's the primary responsibility or role of the probation officer is how do I get this youth connected to those resources and out of this system as quickly as possible.
I know.
Ironically, I remember a 5-year-old in my office when I was, not to get on that pulpit too much, but there have been efforts and attempts to get a minimum age passed through our legislation the last couple of years, a lot more conservative.
Imagine having a 9-year-old and a 17-year-old just not.
Yeah, well,
Ideal situation.
you should preach into the choir right there because they have to figure out how to manage that, right? And we did go through probably 3-4 years ago. I mean, I called it a spike because it was like based on consistency where, we had a half a dozen, probably 10, 11-year-olds at one time in our detention centers, the 3 of them across the state. So, appreciation to, groups like Mike and those folks for saying, I had some pretty pointed conversations with them in the Behavioral Health Alliance. And folks coming together and saying, we gotta figure that out. So we respond as we can. You hate to be in reaction mode all the time, but that's what you do.
Well, I imagine that kind of catches you off.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can be anything but reactive in those situations.
Right.
That's kind of your line of work, reaction.
Yeah, well, yes and no, because like I said, we're fortunate to have that informal system. We're fortunate to have 90%, and I keep pushing that, of our referrals are handled in that way. We're fortunate that I think at this point in time right now, we have 25 plus prevention programs across the state that our districts have created, school-based programs, partnerships with CRIJ up in Kalispell, crisis mobilization program, stabilization program in Missoula, which I kind of like fit into this hybrid assessment center type of thing. We have tutoring programs down in your area that are funded and supported by those prevention funds that come through Youth Court Services. And so been really intentional. I mean, my predecessor's the one who put this together. So we just celebrated at our conference last year programs that have been in place for 10 or more years, and we had a dozen of them that have been around, at least 10. A couple of them, Boys and Girls Club program up in Havre is very heavily supported by the Youth Court Probation Office up there. It's a 20-year-old program. Student intervention program in Buttes, almost 20 years now. So agree, reaction, but again, our focus has been, which I think is, folks don't kind of see that piece, and I'm always preaching that part when I'm in front of folks, that we don't want to minimize the fact that those folks that end up in the Ted Lechner Center for 6-8 months, aren't a priority for us as well. But our goal is to have a system in place that does everything it can to make sure that you're 1 or 2 and done in our places.
Chair. Talking about resources, the prevention funds, those are going to counties for them to disperse. Is that sustainable? Do you need additional resources? How does that look?
Well, I'm a bureaucrat, right? I'm never going to say no to somebody saying you need more money. But again, that structure's been in place. It's the Juvenile Delinquency Intervention Act in place for almost 20 years that we've had that ability to resource those funds. The formula is based on if you can save money in your placement budget, that money reverts back to being able to build community-based programs. And so, never say no to money, but we've been fortunate to have been able to sustain that and build those community-based programs, as a resource. Again, they're not managed primarily from our youth court offices, but those partnerships with agencies within or entities within them.
Yeah, just taken by like you mentioned they're doing the assessment, whatever that's like for you guys,
Right.
and just if there's what additional resources.
Yeah. Right.
To create better opportunity and opportunity that you're already doing.
Yeah, but I think that again goes back to that question sort of around that assessment center stuff, is that what integration piece are we missing? If there's a resource and a funnels from youth court services, if there's a resource and funnel from child family service division, our goal is to not be in either one of those systems, right? And so if there's opportunities to support programs and these agencies that don't have to go through those doors to access it.
My second question is, through the study, was there a mapping done of like the youth support system and basically following an individual, and through whether it's the first kind of road of it's deferred and then the second road if it's transferred over to the adult court, where the system map done?
Yes and no, because of the fragmentation within our systems. I think we can give you a pretty good sense of what happens in youth court. That jump into if you're moving into the adult system, there's not, which I think is definitely opportunities to try to improve that. I mean, we've been talking about that in all systems forever. Is how do you respect somebody's rights to not be followed through all of these systems, but how do you get the players to be able to talk to each other to sort of create that picture? So
I know that there was a study done where they did a mapping of like the criminal justice system. If when a person enters pre-trial, trial, post-conviction, that whole process, I was curious if the study also did it for youth.
Yeah, no, we haven't had that. Again, some capacities within our system, but not to that next level. And a big part of that, again, I go back to, celebrating our informal system, but in some ways, I mean, the disconnect that creates, because if you go through the informal system, the caveat is that you have no record. When at 18, there's no access to that information. All that stuff is de-identified, disconnected. And so should you jump into the next system afterwards, it's difficult to connect those dots.
Yeah, I was thinking sometimes it's good to see it or hear it and see it. So if you could see where the points of contact are happening for the youth, you maybe can see the success of the gaps.
Right.
Do we have any questions online?
Question, Mr. Chair. Nina from Friends of the Children has her hand raised.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Nina.
My face is huge right there. I'm Nina Hernandez. I'm going to jump in quickly. I think I'm the only member of the public on the call, and I appreciate being here. I'm also having some internet issues, and so I've missed probably half of the presentation, and so I apologize if I'm asking something that's been covered. But we are in the prevention world here, and both for Eastern Montana, based out of Billings, and then our sister chapter based out of Missoula, and particularly in Billings, and then the rest of our area, all the way 2 hours away to the Northern Cheyenne Reservation, where we are really kind of knee deep in gang prevention right now, serving children whose families are gang involved. And in my experience, it's the gang awareness education has been fragmented, and I'm not sure if we're just asking the wrong people, but we're having a really hard time getting resources and getting education for our team, and then also for our youth serving partners such as Boys and Girls Club and other people in the area. And I'm on your website right now. I'm really interested to know, how can we go about getting some education, best practices for serving and preventing gang involvement, ultimately preventing juvenile justice involvement. for the Eastern Montana area?
I think the quickest answer I can give you right now is to follow up with me after, and I can connect you with or discuss with you some of the resources that we're currently using, and put you in contact with some of those folks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, other questions or comments for Tom?
Tom, I've learned a bunch sitting here listening to you, and I appreciate you being here.
yeah, no, I'm happy to be here.
And I'm excited to take a look at the crime statistics, but 2 years ago, when I took over your services, out of 24 beds, 8 on the detention side, 8 were filled by those who committed deliberate homicide.
Right.
And we've seen those numbers significantly, we were packed for probably 8-10 months afterwards, and we've seen a significant decline. Are you seeing that statewide, or is that focused on the, Yellowstone County, larger metropolis areas?
Well, I mean, I think I would respond that I don't know that any area has seen that impact as much as Billings did, for sure, but
and I know we could contribute that to the gang influence.
Right.
And taking those kids, and most of those kids went to Pine.
Right.
Or eventually on to MSP.
Right, a lot of those were criminally convicted youth that
But are you seeing that statewide?
I think not just statewide, but nationally, there's been a decrease, and there's some research and information out there that shows that they're, I hate to use the word blip because it doesn't, again, respect the people that had to go through all of that type of stuff, but there was this spike in that, those crimes nationally, and research has shown that it has leveled out across the nation and across our state.
Thank you.
Tom, we appreciate your time and your expertise. Any other questions before we let Tom go?
Come back.
Yeah, like I said, I'm
enjoyed hearing
years
that.
away, so I appreciate the opportunity here, and anytime we can share resources and information, happy to do so.
We'll be reaching out.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, take care.
Okay, review of priority topics for discussion at the September meeting. Jeremy?
Sure. So if you continue on through where we were at, so if you go to, flip it over, the YJC work plan. If we go over to the next page, we take a look at number one, what we have on tap for the next meeting based on our work plan, and then we'll come back and we'll look at our priority areas that we talked about. So as we come into that September meeting, we're looking for draft recommendations for the governor's report. Okay, so review all data recommendations developed to date, and a lot of that will pull information out of that youth court report card. Okay, finalize language using the who should do what and when format. We'll assign data metrics to each recommendation. So mental health, central care, priority levels, and then the target population. We'll have a data presentation from Jeff Fossum, and he actually is the guy that is in charge of putting that youth data together. Okay. He's fantastic. He was also somebody that worked very hard on the assessment center stuff when they were looking at that, and he'll be able to maybe move forward our understanding a little bit. MBCC data presentation. So Janice will come in, and we've talked about before how we struggle getting data, and she'll give us some idea of how the data warehouse works and kind of the barriers we have in having that opportunity to utilize the data warehouse for the juvenile system, which currently it's really not a possibility based on state statute. All right. And then recommendation refinement. And so with that, I'll pull over and we'll talk about kind of what we had picked in our priority levels on the March 4th date. Time served. And so Tom came in talking about clarifying statutory interpretations, identifying whether legislative action is needed, kind of our stakeholders, talking about the courts, probations, and our data center. And so as we come out of here, I think that for me anyway, I have a little better understanding of what it meant. But probably gonna take a little more of a deep dive before I walk out and go, I really truly get what it is that he was talking about. And I don't know if everybody else feels about that, but that's kind of where I'm at as I walked out of that. Also, we were gonna have this week, we were gonna have the discussion on Title II. We're gonna move that over into the September meeting. And Marissa will come in and kind of explain what that Title I Part D actually is. And so talking about the potential strengthening of collaboration between OPI and the other state agencies, improved continuity of education and services after detention and probation. Because as we know, we get these kids, they go in, they do some great work. Looks like they're doing well, we're ready to release them. We send them home, and 3 months later, they're right back. And why does that happen? Because if we don't do any work on the back end, you put kids back in the exact same situation that got them there in the first place. Not shocking that they find their way back. Just, you know, it makes sense whether we're talking about children's mental health. At Yellowstone, kids do great. Everything's fantastic. They go home and it blows up again. Okay. And then identifying implementation barriers and maybe some opportunities, because there is money there. But it's pretty stringent on how it can be used. And so having maybe just a little better understanding of what that process is and what it looks like. Access to counseling, crisis stabilization, and family preservation services. That was recommendation 5. So taking a look at focusing on rural and tribal communities, identifying gaps in service availability, and determine whether legislative or funding recommendations are needed. Our 4th was the assessment centers. We got fantastic information today. We're looking to have Idaho come in and discuss in December kind of how they got where they are, what they did, how they got their funding, and maybe looking at, after having some conversations, that we may also want to take a look at North Dakota, because they're about 6 months to a year moving forward into their process from where we're sitting right now. And then identifying whether Montana should pursue statewide standards or expansion of what's already there. And after listening to Tom, it sounds like there's some of this stuff already in play, but I got information today that I didn't have any idea about. And getting more information from him about what's already in place and what's being done, so that whenever we come forward, if we're looking at that recommendation, then having a full grasp of what's already in place. Our next priority area was the RED, data intake and form consistency. So looking at, do we want to put something forward that says we would really like to see a statewide consistency in intake forms, access to assessing the impact on our RED reporting data, and then considering recommendations for standardized forms. Is that something that we are still interested in trying to move forward? And then lastly, youth justice data infrastructure, and Janice will speak this next time, clarifying why the JDW is not currently an option, identifying alternative data pathways, and determining whether a recommendation is needed to strengthen the statewide data systems. We do know that it is a possibility other states have a dashboard for youth data. Washington's got a fantastic one. You can pull it up on their website. And what barriers we have in place to potentially be able to put something like that in place. So that was our March 4th recommendation that came out of there. And as we sit here on June 3rd, is there any of these pieces that we feel that we want to continue to move forward, or anything new? Do we feel like, as we came out of that time served for youth pretrial, is that something that we need to continue to pursue or not? And so with that question, then, yeah, I'm asking because then I will take that and move it over to information coming out of the June meeting. That's something we feel we still need to pursue, or did we get the answers we needed today from Tom? I know for me, I have a real better understanding, but I probably still need some information. But I don't know if everybody else feels the same way.
Anybody want to comment? I think more information would be good, especially Jeremy, if you feel like you need more too, but anybody else? Yes, Tina says yes.
Okay, so we'll leave that one play. I'll pull that over.
Yep.
The part T or Title I, Part D, we didn't get that information today. I feel like that probably needs to continue to move over to the next meeting.
Agreed.
Access.
Sure. Jeremy, if you can refresh my memory on the Title I Part D coordination recommendation number 3, was that incorporated in the December 25 governor's report? Was there a recommendation made or not?
I don't believe that there was on that, and that was something that came out that we've talked about wanting to, I think more information on to determine what or if that's something that we need to pursue.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. The next piece was access to counseling, crisis stabilization, and family preservation services. Especially when we're talking about our rural and tribal communities, identifying gaps in service availability and determine whether legislative or funding recommendations are needed. Is that something that we need to move forward?
I say yes.
I would think so. Okay. Anybody else?
All right, the next piece is the assessment centers. We had that presentation today and we'll have a follow-up presentation in December, identifying whether we as a board should pursue statewide standards or expansion. Is that a continuation or?
Are you gonna attend that webinar tomorrow, Chairman?
I'm gonna do the best I can because we have a meeting going on tomorrow. So if I am able, yes. My plan is, and actually she's already reached out to me. However, we're struggling getting her emails are not coming into me. So I gave her another email and hopefully we'll get that information. And as soon as I get that information, I'll share it with you guys. So that will be the presentation and the link to that.
I mean, I think if that's something you want to explore, yeah, I think we would continue. I don't know if anyone else can go on that webinar tomorrow or not, but.
Yeah, but like I said, my plan is to jump on that. It'll be based on.
What time is that?
I don't know.
Did she reach out? You said, I mean, did
she reached out. She texted me and said she sent the stuff over and I texted her back and said I didn't get it yet.
Maybe you could send it out to this group.
Yeah.
Get it.
Yeah.
Just here. Oh, it's at 2 Eastern. So
it's at noon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can attend if you send the information.
Okay. As soon as I get it, we'll share it as not only I will also send the last report card out to everybody. So it'll come in that email.
But it sounds like you want to pursue it. Even Tom said he would like it. I don't know. Go ahead, Misty.
Is that the crime crime control meeting tomorrow?
No.
Yeah.
The web.
Yes.
It's during the it's coming off at the same time as our board meeting tomorrow.
Is that what you meant? Is that what you're, so there is a Montana Board of Crime Control meeting tomorrow. That webinar is also tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Next piece is, I thought I said this would be the red data and intake form consistency. Is that something that we want to continue to be a conversation in terms of looking to put something out you got there that we recommended path is something that goes forward. Because right now, depending on where you're at, each department kind of has the ability to do what they how they do that intake. And it sure would be nice if everybody was on the same. And I don't know how you were in that world forever. I don't know how hard it would be to get a standardized form that went across the board.
Nobody wants to share information. That's the problem, is get everybody on the, and then and the smaller departments in the counties, they don't want the state dictating what they're doing. It just, it's always been a power struggle.
Well, it makes an absolute nightmare whenever we have to put numbers together.
Yeah, I totally get it.
I think we want to keep pursuing. It seems like it's always a topic of discussion, but it's turnover. It's departments don't want to share. It's small departments. It's big department.
That's going to cost
Too small, too big.
Yeah.
But
okay. And then lastly, the youth justice data infrastructure. We're going to have a discussion about that next time. But like I said, I understand that based on our statutes, we can't do it in there, but other alternative pathways that would allow us to get that information. And that goes back to number 5. And so I don't know if we can combine that together or leave them as standalone.
Well, could we put the red data under the main data? I mean, to keep it as a bullet point so that we don't forget that that's one of the main reasons, but I think they should be combined. It's data.
Okay.
Chair, to Tina's point, we do have, so for the items that the priority recommendation topics that follow the December 2025 meeting, it's a lot, right, to be able to dive into these topics. So, I mean, we can do, even if I'm thinking logistically, if at the next meeting, if we have youth court data from we have a data presentation to update you guys on the Justice Data Warehouse. If we're pursuing potentially with the Title I Part D, it's just a lot. It's going to be a lot in one meeting. So if we can look maybe between now and September on how we can consolidate some of these topics, we could bring that to the next meeting and figure out how the council wants to move forward. Like because I think the big goal is we have time set aside in September where we as a council look at what the recommendations were made in December 25 to the governor's office. Do we need to carry those over? Do we want to incorporate new things from what we've learned from from the topics that didn't make it in it? And then where do we go from there? It's a lot.
It is a lot.
Yeah. So maybe we have, if we reduce, maybe we reduce or top 3 that we look at. I think we just need to have that conversation because I just want to be aware of your time and peppering you with all the things for all the different topics. So just to keep that in mind.
So can you and Jeremy do that? Is that what you're saying? You guys would narrow this down?
I think, Chair, yeah, I think we could try to, yes, we can try to.
I'm saying I think the council trusts you guys to narrow that down and present to us what you think is doable.
Yeah, I guess what I want you to know is I want to be able to keep, Jeremy and I both, I think, want to be able to keep the momentum for you on the topic and not let it die down. If we have a presenter, keep kind of going down that path. So maybe we can figure out a strategy if we need to have Tom come back or somebody else for time served. And then at September, if we need to have more people for the time served conversation, or do we want to decide as a council if we're done with that and we want to mark it off our list or keep it for the December recommendation conversation? Does that make sense?
Because it is a lot. And you two know better. That's what we need and what is doable.
Okay.
And so, with that,
So we don't need a motion on that.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Because we're just looking at topics is basically what that is and to what we're gonna want to put forward as
Okay.
recommendations.
Perfect. Anybody have any questions or something you feel like they missed? Okay. Thank you, guys. Public comment on any matter within the council's jurisdiction. Is there anyone online? Is, Nina? Is it Nina? She's still there? She gone, Tim?
I'm here.
Okay.
And
Nina, is I
I'm
think.
so sorry.
Comments? You're just eating away.
I am eating my lunch right now. Of course, the one time I hear my name. No, I'm just thankful to be here. This is my first time joining, and very interested in what this group is doing. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being online, and I probably would have given you a better opportunity to tell us who you were. We got a little behind there, so I apologize for that, but thank you for joining us. And if Nina's the only one online with no public comments, nobody in person, so there's no public comment here. So with that, are we ready to adjourn? All right, at 2:00, meeting's over. Thank you.